A blue UFO hovered low, and aliens marched along the cliff. Lena heard her name spoken from a dead radio. Then the valley went silent, like it was holding breath. Lena Hardwell shot wildlife for 15 years, usually alone. A collar map showed wolves deep inside Absaroka wilderness. She rode in with 2 pack horses and sealed camera cases. At dusk, wolf howls turned into a metallic hum. A blue UFO rose, and the wolves answered with silence. Lena reached the meadow at dusk, fog threading pines like smoke. Wolves circled the grass in silence. 2 collared wolves watched her camp from brush. Their collars blinked once, then died. The horses refused the eastern tree line and sidestepped together. A low hum rose from the ridge and deepened. The pack kept perfect spacing, as if trained. One wolf lifted a paw and froze mid-step. Another lowered its head and stared uphill. Lena raised her camera and heard nothing click. Her breath fog thinned, then vanished. The creek gurgle faded, then returned muted. The meadow felt staged, like a rebuilt scene. A blue metallic UFO lifted beyond the ridge and hovered low. It held steady, ignoring wind and gravity. Small white spheres split away and formed an overhead grid. The grid rotated slowly and stayed perfectly centered. It tightened into a clean hex pattern above camp. 3 tall aliens marched along the cliff edge in file. Their limbs moved smooth, with no wasted motion. Their heads turned together, tracking Lena's smallest shift. A white pulse flooded the valley and washed the fog blue. Every device died instantly: camera, GPS, and recorder. Her headlamp stayed on, but the beam bent sideways. It skimmed the snow like water around invisible glass. No shadow formed beneath the spheres or the UFO. The hum matched Lena's heartbeat, then changed its rhythm. The radio clicked on by itself and spoke Lena once. The voice sounded calm, dry, and too close. A sphere drifted near her tent and stopped. It floated at shoulder height and did not wobble. The aliens lifted their long hands toward the wolves. The collared wolf collapsed, trembling, muzzle pressed into ash. The other wolves froze, awaiting permission to move. One alien pointed at the collars, then at Lena. Another alien raised 3 fingers and held them still. The overhead grid pulsed 3 times in perfect sync. Lena tasted metal and smelled ozone in cold air. The UFO shifted 1 meter without any arc. It then returned to its exact prior position. The wolves backed away, still silent, never breaking formation. Lena stood frozen, watched from sky and cliff. The hum faded, but the wolves did not leave. They paced a silent ring around Lena's tent. Their eyes stayed locked on the cliff line. The collared wolf still lay in ash, trembling. The blue UFO held steady beyond the ridge. The overhead grid dimmed, then pulsed once. 3 aliens remained on the rock shelf above. They stood upright, perfectly still, like sentries. A low sphere drifted nearer, then stopped midair. It cast no shadow on snow or grass. One alien lifted a long hand slowly. Every wolf froze in the same instant. Lena heard a click from a dead collar. The collared wolf's tag light blinked without power. Another wolf stepped forward and dropped torn strap fiber. The metal clasp was warm and smelled of ozone. The wolves did not snarl or bare teeth. They watched Lena as if weighing her breath. The aliens turned their heads together, tracking her hands. The grid loosened, then tightened into a neat hex. The hum returned briefly, then cut off. The spheres blinked out in a clean sequence. The aliens stepped backward into fog and vanished. The wolves stayed, holding the ring until dawn. At first light, the pack moved uphill in silence. Lena followed at a careful distance behind them. The wolves kept equal spacing, like a practice drill. They stopped at a dark circle in frosted soil. The circle edge looked cut with a blade. Warmth rose from ash fine as flour. A second circle weighted higher, identical and precise. A third circle sat near bare rock. The wolves refused to step inside the circles. The collared wolf approached, then backed away quickly. 3 aliens appeared on the ledge above, watching. A low sphere drifted down over the nearest circle. The wolves crouched, ears flat, eyes unblinking. The sphere pulsed once, and the ash shifted inward. Symbols flashed inside the columned glow, then wiped clean. One alien pointed at the collars, then at Lena. The collared wolf's tag blinked again, then went dark. Lena raised her lens and got one clear frame. The frame showed aliens facing the wolves, not her. The wolves turned as one and looked away. When Lena looked up again, the ledge was empty. Wolf tracks led straight, then vanished on bare stone. In December, Lena returned alone with upgraded sensors. She carried meters, filters, and a spectrum recorder. Snow erased her trail and softened every ridgeline. The meadow looked staged, like a rebuilt set. The horses refused water and stopped breathing loudly. Wolf tracks circled camp again, then ended cleanly. A collared wolf watched from trees, collar light dead. Another wolf stood behind it, perfectly still. No owls called, and no wind moved grass. The hum returned before any light appeared. It vibrated her chest and loosened her teeth. A blue metallic UFO rose behind the eastern ridge. It climbed without sound or rotor wash. White spheres split off and formed a rigid grid overhead. The grid rotated slowly and stayed perfectly centered. Aliens stood along both slopes, evenly spaced, perfectly silent. Their long fingers flexed, like counting invisible beats. The wolves stayed downwind, watching without a single sound. The collared wolf lowered its head and stopped blinking. Columns of light struck the ground in ordered rows. Each column held steady, then jumped to the next point. Snow did not melt, it folded inward into dark ash. Dark circles formed, clean-edged, identical, and warm. A circle appeared under every light column. The horses shuddered, yet their hooves never shifted. A collared wolf ran in, then stopped mid-stride. Its breath fog froze in place, then vanished. Lena's watch flickered, then lost a full minute. Her compass pointed down, then snapped to north again. Lena raised her camera and captured one clear frame. The frame showed 4 aliens beside the nearest light column. Their bodies looked too thin for their height. Their heads turned with no visible neck strain. A sphere drifted near her tent without casting any shadow. Her screen flickered between 2 times, then went black. A fractal ice pattern crawled across her lens. The ice vanished, leaving the glass perfectly dry. The wolves began circling, keeping equal spacing from Lena. One wolf stepped into ash and did not flinch. A dead radio clicked on by itself. It spoke in a dry mechanical voice, calm and precise. Observation noted. Continue observation. The message repeated 3 times, then stopped. The radio then spoke Lena once, without emotion. Aliens turned together, facing her camp in sync. The hum answered, rising in a slow breathing rhythm. Warmth spread through Lena's palm and wrist. Images flashed of hex cells under snow and stone. She saw wolves moving like pieces on a board. She felt watched from inside the ground. The blue UFO moved closer and paused above the dry creek. The overhead grid tightened into a clean hex pattern. Symbols pulsed inside the columns, then wiped clean again. One alien walked forward, closing distance without visible effort. It stopped near the circle edge and lifted one hand. The collared wolf dropped, trembling, muzzle pressed into ash. The other wolves froze, as if awaiting permission. The spheres blinked once, and the valley went dark. Lena packed fast, hands shaking, breath thin and sharp. Behind her, the hum matched her heartbeat, then changed. After that night, Lena identified 31 related survey sites. They spanned 4 states and followed the same hex grid. Every site produced the same radio message and electronic failures. The pattern kept expanding with patient and deliberate precision. Why would aliens want humans to keep watching their work? Are they mapping wolves, water, or the observers themselves? Share your theory below, then like and subscribe for more cases. Your DNA is not your own, and your memories are a lie. Tonight we expose the shocking truth behind the hybridization agenda. Camille, a woman whose life was irrevocably altered by non-human intelligence, is a reluctant witness. Her testimony suggests the UFO experience is not random, but part of a cold, calculated, multi-generational genetic agenda. This program, which we define as the hybridization agenda, the systematic, hidden genetic engineering and creation of a new species using the human genome, is far closer than most realize. As Camille herself states, "It didn't change my life. It became my life." We will now examine the 2 key encounters that defined her ordeal. Camille's earliest memories were not of innocence, but of disorientation and profound loss. Her trauma began with seemingly innocuous events that later became anchors of her ordeal. She recalls invisible visitations, an unseen, 2-legged entity jumping onto her chest in the middle of the night. These were precursors to the major trauma. One of her core memories is waking up on a beach in the dead of night, miles from home, wearing only her underwear. Her father, finding her missing, had to unlock a series of deadbolts she physically could not manipulate. For years, she buried this event as a nightmare or sleepwalking incident. It wasn't until therapy with hypnotherapist Barbara Lamb that the truth was uncovered. They had placed her there. She was an object of study, returned to her environment once the clinical process was complete. This realization fractured her perception of reality, plunging her into a lifelong obsession. The trauma was compounded by missing time. Around age 8, Camille experienced the telltale signs, hearing a high-pitched frequency, walking down her hallway, and then nothing. Hours later, she would be back in bed with zero recollection. This chronological scar drove her to seek answers, realizing her life was being manipulated and edited without her knowledge. Under deep hypnotic regression, the scope of her involvement in the hybridization agenda became clear. Camille describes an intense, cold light solidifying into a column of powerful blue energy. This non-physical slide pulled her upward, effortlessly penetrating solid matter. The phenomenon supports the interdimensional hypothesis. The beings are not traveling vast distances, but shifting dimensions, materializing and vanishing instantly. Aboard the craft, the environment was designed to disable the human mind. Camille describes a vast, white, seamless room devoid of corners or reference points. The light emanated from the walls themselves. This architectural deception induced disorientation and prevented spatial orientation. The beings were standard grays, tall, with pale, parchment-like skin stretched over disproportionately large heads. Their eyes were massive, black, insect-like orbs, devoid of iris or pupil. Camille stresses they were not malevolent, but non-empathetic, operating with cold clinical detachment. The central horror was the procedure itself. Camille was secured on a thin, cold table that molded to her body. A mechanical arm, ending in a polished gynecological instrument, harvested the fetus she was unaware she carried, a tiny walnut-sized life. This systematic collection of genetic material, specifically from the Rh-negative bloodline, is theorized as the seed of the human genetic experiment. Camille was a biological resource. As the procedure concluded, physical pain vanished, replaced by synthetic comfort. A mechanical voice implanted phrases in her psyche, the final one, "We are always sending you love." This post-hypnotic trigger neutralized trauma and ensured compliance, confirming a long-term, meticulously planned agenda. Years later, armed with the knowledge of her own engineering, Camille refused to remain a passive victim. She decided to engage directly, moving from an abductee to a participant, a process known as CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. Camille traveled to a remote desert location, joining a group focused on conscious contact. She wasn't relying on chance, she was relying on frequency. She focused her intent not on fear, but on confrontation, using her decoded psychological trigger as a kind of reverse password. The pressure was immense. Camille waited, skeptical, nearly giving up. At a moment of psychological surrender, the response was immediate and physically violent. Crack! A concussive burst of sound directly overhead, snapping the desert silence. This was immediately followed by the spontaneous materialization of a dense, metallic gray mist. This sudden, physical rupture of the atmosphere proved the dimensional nature of their travel. From the mist, a sleek, white, V-shaped craft slid out, silently descending to a low altitude. This object was enormous, yet completely silent. The key detail, the one that validated her entire experience, was its anatomy. Underneath the wings, there were 3 translucent, amber spherical objects, 6 in total, resembling large fluid-filled suction cups. These were not lights. Camille testified that they glowed and pulsed in perfect rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. She was witnessing the visible heartbeat of a living machine. This craft was a fusion of organic biology and advanced technology, a biotech hybrid, the mechanical mirror of the genetic hybridization program taking place in the vats. The craft itself confirmed the agenda. The V-craft hovered for a brief, tense period, bathing Camille's location in a silent field of energy. It was observing, acknowledging the frequency of the summons. It wasn't engaging in dialogue, it was performing an ID confirmation. Having verified the source of the communication, the craft then shimmered, warped, and vanished instantly, folding out of our dimensional space. Camille's conscious call had been received, cataloged, and acknowledged by the system. She was now confirmed as an active carrier and a known entity within the protocol. Camille's encounters reveal the chilling truth of the agenda. The focus on the Rh-negative bloodline is key. It is their genetic antidote. The Greys, ancient and advanced, face terminal genetic collapse. Abductions are clinical attempts at self-preservation, using dimensional technology to access their vital resource. The program has shifted from harvesting to deployment. Hybrids, engineered for human compatibility and total compliance, are designed to infiltrate positions of power. The phrase, "we are always sending you love," is a sinister command frequency, ensuring engineered consent. The abduction phase is complete. The occupation phase is imminent. Camille's testimony closes the loop. The Greys are not invaders, but a desperate species reclaiming the planet they ceded millennia ago. Abductions cultivate the new ruling class. Camille is a living witness, and her story is our only defense. The question is existential. How will we respond to a silent genetic takeover? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe Camille's account is evidence of a desperate eugenics program or an elaborate psychological weapon? Like and subscribe for more deep dives into the unexplained. They say the universe is silent, but that's a lie. Sometimes, in the dead of night, it whispers low, cold, and uncomfortably close to your window. And on a few terrifying nights in American history, people swear that whisper became something real, something watching from the tree line, something stepping toward them with intentions no human could predict. These aren't stories about distant lights in the sky. These are the nights when the unknown didn't just appear. It advanced, lifting one man into a beam of light and trapping an entire family inside their own home. And the most chilling part is this: if it happened to them, it could happen to any of us. In the annals of UFO lore, countless testimonies whisper of alien encounters, but few stories carry the weight, the terror, and the paradox of human resistance. Tonight, we examine two of the most extraordinary reports in UFO history, cases in which ordinary people claim they were not only visited by non-human intelligences, but forced to fight for their lives. These are not tales of passive observers. These are battles. First, the forest near Snowflake, Arizona, where a logger named Travis Walton vanished under a beam of blue-green light for nearly 5 days. Second, a humble farmhouse in Kentucky, 1955, where a family believed they were besieged by small, shadowy beings and fired their guns at them for hours. Whether hoax or horror, their claims continue to cast a long shadow over what we think we know about alien contact. On the night of November 5, 1975, Travis Walton, a 22-year-old logger, was returning home with his crew from the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in Arizona. His life until that moment had been one of sweat and timber, of silent woods and creaking trucks. But that night, his world changed forever. As Walton and his 6 co-workers drove along a remote dirt road, they noticed a strange glow ahead in the trees, a metallic disc that hummed into the darkness, casting an unnatural light. According to Walton's later testimony, he stepped out of the truck, drawn by curiosity, and approached the object. The air was heavy with tension. Suddenly, a beam of blue-green light shot from the craft, striking him and hurling him backward. He screamed, and then nothing. His terrified coworkers fled the scene. They drove away in panic, convinced their friend was dead, or worse. When they dared to return, Walton was gone. For 5 days and 6 hours, Travis Walton was missing. A frantic search ensued. Helicopters scoured the forest, search dogs combed the land, and law enforcement questioned his distraught crew. Some whispered of murder, others of madness. When he finally returned on the roadside near Heber, Arizona, he was disoriented, dehydrated, and claimed he had been aboard the very craft that had struck him. Inside that strange ship, Walton said, was a chamber unlike any human architecture. Smooth metallic walls, harsh flickering light, and figures that seemed human but not. 3 beings stood nearby, bald, pale-skinned, and with enormous luminous eyes. Walton described a rectangular contraption across his torso, attached to his body as though part of some alien apparatus. He tried to resist. He stood on a table, seized what looked like a glass cylinder, threatened them, but they did not react as simple animals would. Instead, they maintained a sinister calm. He remembered being taken through narrow corridors, past other disc-shaped crafts parked in a vast hangar. At one point, he blacked out. When he came to, he found himself walking along a deserted road. Behind him, the saucer floated away in silence. Travis's return raised as many questions as his disappearance. He lost weight. He appeared traumatized. He claimed he had been watched, even studied. Multiple polygraph tests followed, and many believe he told the truth. Skeptics call it hoax, but to believers, Walton's story remains among the most credible alien abductions ever recorded. His tale became legend and a movie, Fire in the Sky. But beyond cinema, these are not cinematic fiction. This is a man who insists he survived something no one around him understood. On a sultry August night in 1955, in a rural corner of Christian County, Kentucky, a farmhouse stood quietly under the stars. Inside lived the Sutton family and a handful of carnival workers, gathered for relaxation, stories, and a card game. But by the time the moon had climbed high, the night would turn into something none of them could have imagined. Billy Ray Taylor, one of the visitors, ventured outside to fetch water. Eyes turned skyward, he reported seeing a blazing silvery object streak across the sky, trailing colors like a rainbow. Soon, others joined the watch, and what they witnessed crashed into their lives forever. Figures, small, dark, and unearthly, crept near the windows and doors of the farmhouse. Chaos followed. The family grabbed guns. Elmer Sutton, Billy Ray, and others fired repeatedly. They said up to 12 to 15 little beings appeared, spindly, with claw-like hands, pointed ears, and glowing eyes. Bullets rang out into the night. But according to the witnesses, the creatures were impervious. The shots seemed to clang against some metallic surface. When someone re-entered a window, another figure would float away. When they ran outside to confront them, the beings simply vanished into the forest. For nearly 4 hours, the farmhouse rang with gunfire and terror. Children wept. Shots echoed. Finally, the family fled to the Hopkinsville police station, exhausted and trembling, certain they had survived something alien and hostile. When law enforcement arrived, they found no bodies, no blood, no alien remains. What they did find: bullet holes in screens and windows, shattered wood, and a family changed forever. To many, the Kelly Hopkinsville incident remains one of the most baffling and credible close encounters. Investigators later noted the fear of the family was genuine. Officers described witnesses with elevated pulses and expressions of genuine terror. Skeptics later offered mundane explanations, but for those who lived it, the night was real. These two stories, though decades apart and thousands of miles distant, share a chilling symmetry. Common men and women claiming close contact with unknown non-human intelligences and responding not with passivity but with defiance. In Walton's case, his hostility was internal. He resisted, threatened, tried to make sense of what was happening. He refused to lie down quietly. That very act of defiance, standing, raising an object, speaking, betrays a conviction that what he encountered was not merely a dream. In Kentucky, the Sutton family's reaction was raw, visceral. Guns raised, hearts pounding, bullets flying into the darkness. Their perceived aggressors did not retreat politely. They remained implacable, even mocking, as though testing the family's willpower. That similarity matters. In both narratives, these are not passive victims. These are humans who believed they were under siege and acted to survive. Could both stories be hoaxes, embellished by time and retold by believers? Absolutely. Skeptics on the Walton encounter point to disputed polygraphs or internal conflicts. In the Hopkinsville case, some suggest misidentified wildlife, excited imaginations, or mass hysteria. Yet, hoax or truth, these claims left a mark. Travis Walton's disappearance and return remains one of the most documented abductions in UFO history. The Kelly Hopkinsville siege became legend, spawning UFO folklore, festivals, and debates that endure. They force us to ask, what if contact is not always benevolent? What if the other does not seek peace but study or control? And what of humanity's response when pushed to its limits? If one thing emerges from these stories, it is this: the unknown does not always come in whispers. Sometimes it crashes into our world, and when it does, we fight. Comment your thoughts below, share your own experiences, and subscribe to continue exploring the unknown with us. Keep watching the skies. The Antarctic night was a compression of swirling snow and wind. Dr. Elias Vance worked outside the Outpost Gamma habitat, lowering a deep penetration sonar scanner onto a patch of ancient ice. The data returned an impossible signature. His internal log recorded the findings. Log entry 58, subject, subglacial anomaly. The readings defy conventional understanding. The size is astronomical, 5 kilometers beneath the ice sheet, and the profile is unnerving. A vast, perfectly circular metallic structure. This is deliberate, non-terrestrial engineering. It does not belong to the ice, the rock, or the history of mankind. The magnitude of the discovery was a cold certainty, an artifact of unimaginable provenance. Vance prepared to retract the scanner, but the environment suddenly fractured. The wind died instantly, replaced by a vacuum of silence. Looking up, the sky, stripped of the aurora, held a single, potent, yellow-white light. It hung motionless. The electronic world immediately collapsed. His compass spun wildly, settling on the ground. His radio went dead after static, and his chronograph flashed random time zones. My brain registered a categorical event breach. This was not a geomagnetic anomaly. This was focused, intelligent interference. Vance felt the deep, biological tremor of the unknown, but his analytical self seized control. The light began a controlled descent, contracting into a tight, focused cone directly above the drill site. The ice beneath his boots began a low internal vibration, causing fine dust particles to rise and shimmer. Vance stopped his retreat. Retreat guarantees nothing but the loss of data. Survival is secondary to documentation. He made a conscious choice. He activated his hardened field camera and audio recorder, directing them toward the mesmerizing light source. The light swelled, changing from focused yellow to a consuming, absolute white. The humming beneath his feet escalated, pressing against his chest. He managed a final, blinding glance upward as the light consumed his vision. The overwhelming intensity rendered the scene void, erasing the boundary between ice and observer. The camera's final frame recorded only the silent, white ignition of his abduction. This was the unavoidable pivot, the moment science was abandoned for the reality of the impossible. Elias Vance was jolted from the void by profound, unnatural cold. His eyes snapped open. He was naked, weightless, suspended in a thick, perfectly clear liquid that coated his skin. The sound of his own breathing was a hollow, frantic gurgle. He was sealed within a massive, flawless cylindrical tube, a monumental test tube of seamless crystalline material. Panic asserted itself. He thrashed, slamming his forearm against the curved wall, generating only weak ripples in the fluid. I am sealed. I am submerged. The material is impossible to breach. The terror was amplified by the silence. The environment outside the liquid was noiseless, yet overwhelmingly present. He forced his vision past the liquid surface. The interior of the vessel was a vast spherical space, sheathed in a matte, silver-white metal, a clinical architecture of absolute curved sterility. Through the translucent wall, he saw them, the Watchers, shadowy figures, unnaturally slender with large, domed craniums. He could only discern the absolute, reflective blackness of their colossal eyes, regarding his plight with impassive scrutiny. He was the sample. Fine, metallic filaments, thinner than hair, extended through the tube wall, adhering precisely to his nerve clusters, his temples, neck, and wrists. They glowed faintly, transmitting data. On a nearby panel, the data was rendered not in human characters, but in a stream of flowing geometric symbols depicting his state, heartbeat, respiration, and the rapid, complex flux of his neural activity. Every signal is quantified. My suffering is merely data. A sophisticated, segmented robotic arm extended from the ceiling, its motion frictionless. It carried a focused orange-red beam emitter, which swept the length of his body. The arm projected a chillingly detailed holographic rendering onto the observation wall, a three-dimensional map of his internal systems. His skeletal frame in cold blue, his organs in faint green, and the dense electrical network of his brain pulsed in violet, a real-time dissection presented without apology. As the arm retreated, Vance managed to twist slightly. He saw an adjacent tube, identical to his own. Suspended within that liquid was another figure, human-sized, completely motionless, skin ethereal, pale white. The realization was a crushing weight in the fluid. This is not a chaotic event. This is a recurring operation. I am not the first, nor am I likely to be the last. I am simply the newest entry in a systematic ledger of biological research. I am a data point in their immense ongoing program. The clinical precision of the facility was the true source of horror. The experiments intensified. The liquid around him darkened, turning a milky, aggressive yellow. Sensory overload became the means of measurement. A wave of searing heat caused involuntary muscular spasms, immediately followed by a profound, draining cold. The geometric symbols outside flashed wildly. He felt a deep, sharp, invasive pain at the back of his neck, the sensation of a foreign object being inserted or extracted. He thrashed, but the effort was futile, dissolving into weak bubbles. Through a distant, curved viewport, he saw a small, fragile blue marble, Earth. He was far beyond the atmosphere. There is no escape. I am entirely within their dominion, millions of miles from the safety of any known jurisdiction. The isolation was total. A new device descended directly above the crown of his stasis tube. It emitted a rhythmic, hypnotic light, timed perfectly to the violet energy output of his neural mapping. Vance felt a sudden, terrifying shift in his consciousness, a profound, existential detachment. His entire life, his memories, began to stream across his internal vision in a chaotic, reversed rush. They are not merely reading the information. They are cataloging, copying, and perhaps fundamentally altering the source code of my identity. His awareness began to dim. The tube's clinical light faded to a gray haze. The hum of the machinery ceased to register. He was overwhelmed by the conviction that his narrative was over, his consciousness about to be reduced to sterile data in an alien archive. My body is lost. My freedom is gone. Now, my entire history, my very sense of self, is being professionally, clinically erased. The light finally extinguished itself. In the aftermath of the blackout, total silence enveloped Vance. He existed in a void of consciousness. Then, a thin, needle-like spike of light appeared, not the sterile blue of the lab, but a sharp, frigid external light. His awareness accelerated toward this single point, seemingly passing through a non-space. He was recovering, not fragments of memory, but the raw recording of his capture. This is not their playback. This is my mind's final desperate download, retrieving the one moment of absolute truth before the surgical memory excision. The image stabilized, the small, insignificant research habitat, the vast, menacing sky, and his own figure standing alone on the ice. He understood that he was being given a final, unedited view of the event that brought him to the sterile tube. From his recovered memory camera perspective, the scene achieved terrifying clarity. The dark, seamless hull of the teardrop-shaped vessel was suspended above the clouds, encircled by a potent corona of golden light. He saw his tiny silhouette on the white expanse, looking upward. Without warning, a massive, focused column of pure golden energy erupted from the vessel's underside, striking the ice precisely at his location. The force was palpable, even in memory. Scientific instruments, ice shards, and compacted snow were caught in the field, spiraling upward in a chaotic vortex. His body was immediately seized and lifted, pulled vertically, trapped within the center of the brilliant golden cylinder. He was reduced to a small dark form ascending rapidly into the craft's dark underbelly. The sound was a low, deep, visceral rumble that eclipsed his own frantic heartbeat. In the blinding instant before the light consumed him entirely, the certainty was absolute. This is the mechanism, the precise, overwhelming force that erased my reality and transported me to the lab. This golden beam is the clean, efficient tool of my abduction. This raw, terrifying image was the final, definitive data point delivered to his mind. The golden light achieved maximum intensity, a solid, white detonation, and then, abruptly, vanished. Vance found himself lying on his back, gasping on the icy surface. The sky was a non-committal gray. Beside him, pressed into the ancient ice, was a faint, geometric circle, the ghostly imprint of the vessel's landing field. He sat up, his head throbbing. Everything between the moment he raised his camera and the moment he woke up was gone, a successful excision of memory. He pulled off his glove and instinctively rubbed the nape of his neck. His fingers located a small circular scar at the base of his skull, a fresh, geometric incision. He forced a logical, rational conclusion. Hypoxia. Severe hypothermia. I must have simply collapsed and drifted into unconsciousness. Nothing more. Yet the final, persistent thought remained. I do not recall the events that transpired, but in the quiet moments between wakefulness and sleep, the terrifying pull of a brilliant golden light often returns, and I carry the certainty of having been pulled, however briefly, from the surface of this earth. Welcome to the Deep Archives. For decades, the public narrative of alien encounters has been dominated by the gray entity, small, frail, and clinical. But what happens when the grays are simply the staff, and the true power rests with a commanding presence operating from a hidden royal court? This is the story of Filiberto Cardenas, a Cuban immigrant in Miami, 1979, whose experience didn't just document an abduction, it exposed a rigid, terrifying hierarchy operating beneath our world. The late 1970s in South Florida were volatile, a blend of Cold War paranoia and a cultural explosion of the burgeoning UFO phenomenon. Cardenas's case, however, transcended the sensationalism of the era. It became a cornerstone of ufology due to an unprecedented combination of evidence: multiple external eyewitnesses to the event, 108 quantifiable physical marks left on the victim's body, and the subsequent, highly consistent testimony under repeated hypnotic regression. This wasn't hearsay. This was an investigation with tangible evidence, classified as a close encounter of the fourth kind, CE4K. Tonight, we detail the evidence that proves the existence of the chief. The date was late January 1979. Filiberto Cardenas was driving with 3 friends on a remote road outside Hialeah near the Everglades. The atmosphere was calm until 1:45 a.m. when, without warning, the vehicle died instantly. This classic electromagnetic effect, EMF signature, where an advanced energy source neutralizes ground-based electronics, was the first red flag. Their quartz wristwatch, a simple timing device, also ceased function simultaneously, a deliberate surgical act of isolation. As panic set in, a massive, silent, disc-shaped craft descended slowly nearby. Its sheer size was immense, casting a disproportionately eerie glow on the secluded garden where the car was immobilized. According to the friends, Cardenas, standing outside the car, was struck by an unseen, powerful force field. He was rendered instantly catatonic and paralyzed, a physiological shutdown preventing resistance. Before the horrified eyes of his 3 companions, Filiberto was levitated, slowly and silently lifted, into the belly of the immense, hovering ship. The 3 friends, terrified and unable to start the car, fled the scene on foot. Their subsequent consistent testimony became a critical initial piece of corroboration for investigators. Crucially, this event was not isolated. Reports later verified that air traffic control, ATC personnel at a nearby airport detected an unidentified flying object exhibiting extreme velocity and unusual maneuvers in the vicinity at the exact time Cardenas vanished. This official, multiple-source confirmation elevated the Cardenas case from a simple abduction claim to a documented investigation supported by external observational data. Inside the craft, the terrifying medical procedure began. Filiberto recalled being in a large, cold, brightly lit room staffed by the classic gray entities. They were short, approximately 4 feet tall, with large black, almond-shaped eyes and smooth, grayish skin. He described them as emotionless technicians, utilizing strange small tools to perform a comprehensive, intrusive physical examination. The most damning and unique piece of physical evidence was what Cardenas carried back: 108 small, perfectly circular marks etched across his body. These were documented by investigators, notably on his upper chest, back, and limbs. These were not scars. They were fresh, meticulously placed pinpoint punctures or microburns. The exact count, 108, is highly suggestive of a calculated, methodical process, potentially a diagnostic tally, biosampling array, or, most chillingly, the installation points for an advanced neuromonitoring device. Cardenas returned bearing a quantified physical receipt of the encounter, separating his account from almost every other abduction narrative in history. The medical examination was only the preliminary step. Cardenas was next transported to a massive, complex facility. He described being moved to a cavernous area, an immense underground or undersea base, a highly technological chamber that felt like an artificial cave or deep-sea habitat. This detail immediately links the Cardenas file to theories of non-interplanetary but subterranean or hollow Earth operations. Here, he encountered the entity that revealed the true structure of the operation: the chief. This being was dramatically different from the Greys, tall, standing between 6 and 7 feet, majestic and uniquely intimidating. He wore a long, flowing, dark yellow or gold cape and sat upon a large, ornate throne. He was the master, the obvious figure of authority in this terrifying royal court. The biggest revelation was the communication. The chief spoke not only telepathically but verbally, in perfect, flowing Spanish. This suggests either an ancient integration into human culture or the ability to instantaneously synthesize complex language, a profound technological capability that eliminates the need for telepathic ambiguity. The chief delivered a solemn and direct warning. Humanity was on a definitive path to self-destruction, primarily through environmental ruin and endless warfare. He stated that the alien program was a genetic preservation effort. They were meticulously collecting and studying human samples to ensure the continuation of the species should Earth fail to sustain itself. This confirmed Cardenas's terrifying realization. His abduction was part of a planetary-scale intervention, not a random scouting mission. Before Cardenas was returned, the chief presented him with a concrete piece of evidence, a small, heavy metallic ring inscribed with alien symbols. The object became the most coveted piece of hard evidence. Investigators attempted to analyze the material, looking for isotopic anomalies or unidentifiable elements. While laboratory results were often inconclusive, a common outcome for alleged alien artifacts, the unique, non-terrestrial symbols inscribed upon it cemented its role as the chief's definitive, physical stamp on the encounter. It wasn't just a gift, it was a psychological anchor, a constant reminder of his ownership and the secrets he carried. The ordeal continued. Weeks after his return, Filiberto received a powerful telepathic summons. They wanted him back, and this time he was instructed to bring his wife, Margarita Cardenas. The second abduction, which included Margarita, provided the final, powerful piece of corroboration. The investigation was led by respected ufologist Virgilio Sanchez Osejo. Recognizing the limitations of conscious recall in traumatic events, both Filiberto and Margarita underwent multiple separate sessions of hypnotic regression with different specialists. The results were astonishing. Under deep hypnosis, both Filiberto and Margarita recounted their experiences: the paralysis, the graze, the chief, the subterranean base, and the medical procedures, with unwavering consistency across all sessions and all practitioners. This includes the consistent description of the chief's appearance, the golden throne, and the purpose of the genetic program. While skeptics often cite regression therapy as prone to confabulation, creating false memories through suggestion, the dense, complex, and harmonious overlap of details between the two independent witnesses convinced many professional researchers that they were dealing with genuine, suppressed memories of a shared, traumatic reality. The Cardenas file is a masterclass in organized terror. It forces a fundamental shift in ufology. The small, silent grays are merely the technicians and the workforce. The true command rests with the tall, regal chief on the golden throne, an entity with the authority to grant physical evidence and deliver planetary mandates. This implies a chilling multi-species hierarchy, where the grays serve as the expendable pawns in a far grander scheme of information gathering and genetic intervention. The most disturbing implication is the subterranean agenda. If the chief is operating not from a distant galaxy like Zeta Reticuli, but from a vast, high-tech network beneath the Florida Straits, then the threat is not millions of light years away. It is integrated into the very fabric of our planet. This supports the terrifying hypothesis that these entities are not casual space visitors, but ancient Earth inhabitants, or highly integrated operatives who have been here hidden all along. The convergence of evidence, the 108 physical marks, the unusual metallic ring, and the consistent testimonies, is not merely proof of an encounter. It is a signature of alien ownership. The Cardenas family was branded and monitored. Their legacy is a reminder that the phenomenon of alien abduction is not just about lights in the sky. It's about a methodical, intelligent, and ongoing interaction with humanity, dictated by the powerful masters on the hidden thrones. What do you believe the 108 marks represent? Was it a biological diagnostic receipt, or a piece of tracking technology installed by the chief? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and tell us which level of the alien hierarchy you fear the most. There is a very specific time when Route 54 becomes lethal: 2:11 a.m. If your radio cuts out, your GPS dies, and your phone connects to 911 by itself, don't bother hitting the brakes. They've already found you. If that unsettled you, wait until you hear what happened at exactly 2:11 a.m. Leona Ward was a 911 operator in the quiet, isolated town of Santa Rosa, New Mexico. The town's official population stood at 2,744, a figure that felt generous on most days. For 12 years, Ward had mastered the familiar, often comforting rhythm of the desert and the deep silence of the graveyard shift. She recognized the voices of the local farmers, the teenagers pulling harmless pranks, and the lonely elderly residents seeking reassurance. She knew her routine, her town, and her job. Santa Rosa existed primarily as a necessary pit stop on Route 54, the kind of place travelers only glanced at. They would fill their gas tanks, grab beef jerky and a Coke, use the facilities at the Love's truck stop, and then immediately vanish back onto that endless ribbon of black highway. Route 54 was a north-south artery cutting through the desolate desert, linking Tucumcari to the north with Alamogordo to the south. Most of the territory it traversed was empty land, stunningly beautiful in the harsh light of dawn, yet utterly devoid of human presence, and profoundly lonely. Ward insisted she wasn't crazy, despite questioning her own sanity countless times. She was compelled to recount everything that had happened, detailing the terrifying, precise pattern that began exactly at 2:11 a.m. The beginning of the nightmare was the transition from Thursday night to Friday morning, March 14, 2019. Ward was seated at her console, anticipating the usual quiet inertia of the early morning hours. At precisely 2:11 a.m., her headset exploded with sound. It wasn't the sound of a bad signal or typical cell interference. It was a dense, heavy, unnatural static, a sound so saturated it felt physically palpable, as though the caller was trapped beneath tons of water or broadcasting from a distant, vibrating star. The sheer wrongness of the sound sent a shiver down her spine, raising the hairs on her arms. Piercing this sonic wall was the desperate, trembling voice of a young man, Michael Valdez. He claimed he was driving his gray 2015 Honda Civic on Route 54 and was being pursued by lights in the sky. The terror in his voice was not manufactured, it was raw, primal fear. Valdez reported a complete systems failure. His radio, GPS, and cell phone were dead, yet somehow, miraculously, the 911 line had connected. He sounded like a man drowning in technological isolation. The data screen offered no comfort. Ward's console remained stubbornly blank. No coordinates, no tower triangulation, no incoming log-nothing to anchor the call in reality. She could hear his panicked breathing, the frantic details of his vehicle, and his increasing desperation. He described seeing shapes within the pulsing light and screamed for immediate help before the line instantly went dead. There was no fading, no clicking, just an instantaneous, complete severance of the connection. Ward dispatched Officer Ruben Marquez. While waiting, she checked her logs. The horrifying reality sunk in. Her system showed no record of the call ever being placed. The only remnant was an automated recording file that, chillingly, was exactly 8 seconds long and contained nothing but the heavy, underwater static. The 4 minutes of desperate conversation she had just experienced had simply been erased from the system's memory. At 2:34 a.m., Marquez reported back. He had found no sign of the Honda Civic. The highway was desolate, just as it usually was at that hour. The final, unsettling confirmation arrived hours later from the Albuquerque police. Michael Valdez was safely home, having been asleep since midnight. His gray Civic was cold and dusty, confirmed not to have been driven for days. Valdez had been at his residence, yet Ward knew with absolute certainty that she had heard a more perfect echo of him screaming into the void on Route 54. Officer Marquez later confided in Ward. Though he initially dismissed it as an atmospheric anomaly, what he saw at 02:45 a.m. near mile marker 290 was impossible. He described an intensely bright white light hovering miles off the highway. It did not drift or accelerate. It abruptly teleported a significant distance south. Then, with an acceleration that defied all known physics, faster than any fighter jet or space shuttle launch, it shot straight up into the black sky and vanished. Marquez, a man whose professional credibility was everything, was visibly shaken by the impossibility of the sighting. The silence that followed the Valdez incident lasted 3 weeks, but for Ward, it was merely an anticipation. The dread became reality on April 4th at exactly 02:11 a.m. The headset erupted with the exact same, uniquely terrifying dense static. This time, the panicked voice belonged to Sarah Baker. She was also on Route 54, and her terror was fueled by recognition. She mentioned seeing the news story about the other people, indicating the phenomenon was already known in hushed rumors or local reports. Sarah described a massive object hovering directly above her blue Ford Escape. The object was enormous, not a plane, emitting pulsing red and white lights. She detailed a visceral sensory assault, a deep, powerful humming sound that didn't just rattle the car, but vibrated through her body, causing excruciating pain in her teeth and bones. It was a physical violation transmitted through sound. She then whispered that she saw something opening up beneath the object, revealing a blinding white light, and within that light, dark shapes, too tall, too thin, confirming her deepest fear. They can't be human. The line cut out instantly. The outcome was identical. Sarah Baker was later confirmed to be safe at home in Las Cruces, her vehicle in her garage, having never left. The call log remained blank, and the recording was 8 seconds of static. The pattern was sealed. In the following months, their 0211 a.m. calls continued. Ward logged them mentally, knowing her system wouldn't retain the evidence. The victims were found safe at home, yet their cars were discovered abandoned on Route 54. Ward knew these people had been subjected to something traumatic and invasive. They were safe, but deeply tampered with. The authorities began to focus on the vehicles themselves. The most chilling commonality was the ritualistic evidence left behind. The abandoned cars were always found centered and perfectly framed within a perfect triangular shape, formed by 3 large, circular, thermal burn marks etched into the asphalt. These scorch marks were meticulously spaced approximately 47 feet, about 14 meters apart. Forensic analysis confirmed the pavement beneath the car was still warm, indicating the powerful thermal energy had been focused and released just moments before the car was left behind. This geometric precision ruled out natural phenomena or any conventional explanation. It suggested a controlled, measured operation, a harvest, a retrieval, or a signal. By December 2025, 2 years after the initial incident, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Leona Ward was no longer a lone operator dealing with an anomaly. She was the central, critical component of a joint task force comprising the FBI and the New Mexico State Police. Her dispatch office was now a field command post, equipped with specialized surveillance and recording devices. The mission was clear: intercept the next event and secure evidence. The tension in the office was almost unbearable. Tonight is Saturday, December 6th, 2025. The clock shows 2:08 a.m. Only 3 agonizing minutes remain until the expected time of contact. FBI agents are stationed silently in the adjacent room, monitoring multiple feeds. Recording devices are active and being double-checked. A fully prepared response team is standing by directly on Route 54, strategically positioned and ready to move. Ward's hand is firmly on her headset, her notebook open and her pen poised. She had stopped feeling fear long ago. Now, there was only determination. In 3 minutes, Ward will find out if all their preparation is enough. She is the nexus point, the only reliable constant in the phenomenon. The truth they seek is about what has been taking people off the highway, what has been utilizing their 911 dispatchers as a means of communication, and what has been deliberately leaving those perfect triangular burn marks a signature in the desert. The clock reads 029. The entire fate of understanding this phenomenon rests on the next 120 seconds. Ward concludes her account with the same chilling professional warning she issues to the task force. Route 54 between Santa Rosa and Vaughn is a kill zone at 2:11 a.m. If you are there and your GPS fails, your radio cuts to static, and your phone connects to only one number, 911. We will hear you. We will document your call. We will send help as fast as we can, but the question remains, are we ready for what happens next? This testimony you are listening is my attempt to bring the truth of Route 54 out into the light, and I need your help to keep it visible. If you find this information compelling, if you believe this phenomenon needs to be investigated further, please hit that subscribe button, leave a thumbs up, and share your theories in the comments below. Your support ensures this message and the patterns we uncover can't be easily silenced. Late Tuesday night in the West Texas oil fields, Dalton Ridgway pulled up to Pump 7, expecting nothing but the familiar chug of machinery and empty darkness. Then his electronics died, the air turned razor cold, and a perfect ring of blue-white lights appeared in total silence 50 feet away. 2 minutes later, it vanished, and Dalton realized he hadn't just seen something impossible, he had lost 9 minutes of his life. The story of Dalton Ridgway, a gritty, wary 42-year-old oil worker unfolds in the deep, unyielding solitude of the West Texas oil fields. After 7 years navigating the endless black grid of Kalashi roads, Dalton was accustomed to the rhythmic, comforting chugging of the pump jacks. On a late Tuesday night, around 11:46 p.m., he arrived at Pump 7, killed his engine, and stepped into the profound, star-drenched darkness. That is when the anomaly appeared. 50 feet from the pump, suspended silently above a low, rusty metal giard, was a perfect ring of light. This was not scattered light. It was composed of 12 individual orbs of pale blue-white energy, arranged in a precise 20-foot diameter circle. They glowed with such controlled intensity that there was zero light spill, pure, contained energy that felt scientifically impossible. The physical effects were immediate and disorienting. A profound, unnatural cold enveloped him, sinking deeper than any West Texas winter. The air was thick with the sharp, acidic scent of ozone, the smell of a massive electrical discharge or superheated metal. Simultaneously, his electronics failed. His digital watch began to beep erratically, flashing meaningless sequences, and his phone, which moments before held a 60% charge, went completely dead. Dalton watched, frozen, as the 12 lights began a slow, synchronized, rhythmic rotation. After what Dalton estimated was just 2 minutes of paralyzed observation, the light vanished with a silent, absolute finality. When his colleague, Hector Moran, arrived at 11:56 p.m., Dalton was visibly shaken. The simple fact was undeniable. Despite his own internal clock and malfunctioning watch, which read 11:49 p.m., he had lost exactly 9 minutes of time. Furthermore, the rusty giard where the light had rested was now scorching hot to the touch, a sign of extreme, localized heat transfer. His supervisor dismissed it as St. Elmo's fire, but Dalton recognized the precision, the cold, and the blatant temporal distortion as evidence of a disciplined, purposeful presence. His exhaustion was instantly replaced by an unshakable obsession. He needed quantifiable proof. 3 weeks later, on another Tuesday night, Dalton was fully prepared. Alone at the remote Pump 12, his vehicle was outfitted with a charging pack for his phone, and his mind was tense with anticipation. At 1:09 a.m., the familiar, chilling cold descended, and the air crackled with a silent tension. This time, the formation was a perfect triangle of 3 larger, more intense blue-white lights, hovering 100 feet away. Shaking but steady, Dalton grabbed his phone and began to record, capturing 4 minutes and 17 seconds of the lights executing a complex, synchronized geometric pattern, a visual language. Suddenly, the triangle expanded, stretching its vertices outward to reveal the center, a massive, dark, physical craft. Its surface was non-reflective, appearing to absorb all ambient light, giving it a terrifying depth, like a perfect hole punched in the night sky. There were no visible rivets, seams, or conventional propulsion methods, a hallmark of true anomalous aerial vehicles, AAVs. As it descended slowly, a circular aperture opened in its underside, emitting a profound, visceral crimson light that pulsed, indicating a colossal, controlled energy source. Observing this light, Dalton experienced an acute cognitive jump, a jarring, instantaneous switch in consciousness. One moment, he was terrified and watching. The next, he was sitting back in his idling truck. The dash clock read 1:42 a.m. He had lost precisely 33 minutes of conscious awareness and memory. Scrambling out, he ran to the landing site. The metal giard was intensely hot. Below it, the ground was undeniable. The gravel had been swept away into a clean circle, and the soil beneath was vitrified, melted, fused, and cooled instantly into brittle, glassy earth, clear evidence of plasma weapon or extreme heat dissipation used by an advanced technology. Dalton resolved to keep the video a secret, acquiring the specialized EMF detector and high-end camera with Hector's help to prepare for the inevitable third act. 5 weeks after the second encounter, Dalton was back at Pump 7, his EMF detector placed strategically on his truck hood. It didn't beep, it began to scream, a loud, piercing, insistent alarm signaling the anomaly's return. Hundreds of individual blue-white lights appeared, arranging themselves in a breathtaking, ever-shifting fractal pattern, before finally coalescing into a single, complex object resembling a floating building of light and shadow. This ultimate structure was entirely non-Euclidean. Its angles and geometry appeared to shift based on Dalton's perspective, consistent with descriptions of high-level, possibly interdimensional, craft. At this moment, Dalton's sensory and cognitive perception shifted. The veil lifted. He saw beyond the light to the pure energy driving it, understanding the geometry of the universe. He felt like a colorblind man suddenly granted the full electromagnetic spectrum. A single telepathic question imploded in his consciousness. Why do you observe? With his entire will, his soul's deepest impulse, Dalton responded, I want to understand. The vast floating structure dissolved, the hundreds of lights condensing rapidly into a single perfect sphere of light hovering barely 10 feet from his face. The sphere acted as a conduit, expanding his mind and filling it with compressed knowledge, a massive, silent download. He perceived the entities not as biological creatures, but as conscious energy patterns, geometric arrays of existence. They revealed themselves as the archivists, whose purpose was to meticulously record everything, every star, every atom, every thought, in a cosmic battle against entropy, the universe's eventual decay. They chose Dalton because his motivation was pure understanding, not fear or conquest. The lost time was not abduction. It was the duration required for the compressed data, an equivalent of years of research, to be fully written onto his consciousness. The sphere vanished, leaving Dalton kneeling in the dirt, overwhelmed not by terror, but by the shattering, overwhelming beauty of the cosmic truth. The encounter fundamentally altered Dalton Ridgway. He kept the video footage, using it as his anchor to the truth. For a man who spent his life navigating the plains, trusting only his own reality was the foundation he had left. This quality qualified him for a truth the world would reject. 2 years later, he quit the oil fields, enrolled in community college to study physics, and eventually earned his doctorate. He became Dr. Dalton Ridgway, an astrophysicist who dedicated his life to anomalous observations and unexplained phenomena. He never spoke publicly about his nights in West Texas, but his academic career was built upon the knowledge he acquired. He published dense, technical papers on electromagnetic anomalies and complex geometric patterns, works that hinted at the profound truths he held without ever stating them outright. He established himself at the edges of the map, where accepted science broke down. And every few years he would receive an email or a letter from someone else who had seen the lights, experienced lost time, or gained a strange, inexplicable certainty. Dr. Ridgway always responded, validating their experiences, knowing that the archivists were still out there, still recording. This is the heart of the story, the moment a simple oil worker stepped past the edge of normal reality and saw the mechanism behind it, the archivists quietly recording everything while the universe slowly decays. But here's what matters to us. If ordinary people like Dalton can be chosen, then what is it about your life, your attention, your curiosity, your need to understand that could make you a candidate too? And if any of this feels strangely familiar, don't scroll past. Drop a comment and keep it simple. Tell me where you are, what you experienced, whether your electronics failed like a battery drain or a signal drop, or your clock jumped, and what you felt in your body, cold, numbness, dizziness, ringing in your ears, anything. Every week I'm going to pick the most specific reports, compare the overlaps, and start building a real hotspot map from the patterns. If you want to be part of the group that tracks the real signs, hit subscribe. Don't just watch, document. Some disappear without leaving footprints. Others disappear by being deleted. On a clear Nevada morning, Mara Lewis watched a column of white light stab straight through the sky like a spear pinned to the earth. 34 minutes later, her aircraft data said she had not moved at all. 4 days after that, her flight coordinator, Victor Hale, was gone. Not missing, not dead, erased. Mara Lewis was 32, former Air Force, now flying contract environmental surveys along restricted edges of Nevada's test corridors. She trusted instruments the way other people trusted instinct. She trusted airspeed, fuel flow, heading, and the calm repetition of routes that never changed. Victor Hale was the ground link. He watched her telemetry, marked her waypoints, kept her on schedule, and kept her safe by being the voice that always answered. On August 14th, the sky gave Mara something that did not belong to weather or training or any human chart. At 6:45 over waypoint Alpha, the desert looked ordinary from above. Pale ridges, dry washes, scattered scrub, the kind of landscape that hides secrets simply by being too empty to question. Then the column appeared. a vertical shaft of white light, impossibly clean, rising from the ground and continuing upward past cloud height, past blue, as if it did not stop at atmosphere at all. It did not bloom or flare like lightning. It did not diffuse like sun glare. It was precise, like geometry forced into the sky. Mara banked to confirm it was real, and the light did not shift the way a reflection would. It remained anchored to a point in the desert like a nail through a map. As she closed the distance, the ground beneath it resolved into a perfect circle, a burn scar too symmetrical to be a wildfire. About 300 feet across, scorched into a crisp boundary, as if the sand had been branded by a massive seal. The surface inside the ring looked fused, darker and glassy in places. Even from altitude, it read as heat that had been controlled, not heat that had spread. Her instruments still looked normal for a few more seconds, as if the aircraft itself was debating whether to believe what her eyes were seeing. Then the first failure hit. The radio did not degrade into static. It simply stopped, like sound had been switched off. The radar blanked. The navigation display blinked once, then steadied on a frozen value that refused to update. Mara tried to turn away, a simple retreat that should have been automatic. The controls resisted, not like a jam, not like a mechanical failure, like an invisible hand had decided her heading for her. At the boundary of the light, the world began to misbehave. The air outside the windshield seemed thicker, not with weather, but with geometry. Her altimeter held, her engine held, and yet the horizon no longer shifted the way it should. It felt like the sky had been pinned in place. Then she saw them. Not reflections, not clouds. Aircraft. Dozens of them, suspended at different angles around the column like objects embedded in clear resin. A B-52 hung nose up, frozen mid-climb. A military helicopter sat tilted as if caught in a sudden gust that never finished happening. Older silhouettes hovered beside newer ones, all locked in the same impossible stillness. No contrails, no rotor blur, no motion at all. Mara's stomach dropped as the realization landed. This was not a beam in the sky. It was a trap that could hold time. She pulled the yoke and felt the response vanish. The controls did not jam mechanically. They simply stopped belonging to her. The Cessna continued forward with gentle certainty, as if guided on rails, slipping toward the center of the column. In the brief seconds before the light swallowed the cockpit, her instruments began to lie. Numbers flickered into values that could not coexist. Heading and speed remained calm while the world outside looked closer and farther at the same time. Her phone screen flashed once, not with an app, but with a blank brightness that felt like an eye-opening. And in that tightening space, Mara understood one thing with brutal clarity. Whatever held those aircraft was aware of her arrival, and it was making room. Mara never felt the aircraft enter the column. There was no jolt, no turbulence, no sense of crossing a boundary. One moment she was watching the white shaft carve the sky. The next, the cockpit was inside a brightness that didn't behave like light. It didn't illuminate, it replaced. Shadows didn't fade, they stopped existing. Sound thinned into a muffled layer. The engine vibration became distant, like a memory of motion instead of motion itself. Outside the windows was a pale emptiness threaded with faint grid lines as if the air had been printed. The suspended aircraft were closer now, and worse. Not just frozen, but collected. A B-52 hung at an angle that should have ended in catastrophe, yet it stayed pinned. A military helicopter sat motionless with rotor blades locked mid-sweep. Older silhouettes hovered too. Airframes that belonged to decades Mara knew only from manuals. They weren't floating, they were archived. Her instruments tried to argue. The GPS string kept reordering itself. The clock flickered through impossible timestamps. A warning tone repeated too steadily to be random, too clean to be failure. Then something noticed her. Not a figure, not a voice. A tension, vast and ancient, pressing against the inside of her skull like deep water. Memories opened with surgical precision. Childhood, training, the first solo, stall recovery, the smell of fuel on hot tarmac, Victor Hale's face in the control room. Each moment surfaced, turned, inspected. The pain wasn't physical. It was cognitive. Her identity tightened into a shape that could be measured. The harder she resisted, the more she sensed resistance itself being logged. A final impression branded itself into her mind. The column wasn't a beam. It was a corridor of light with faint circuitry like striations, bending where geometry shouldn't bend. The frozen aircraft weren't accidents. They were samples, held at the edge of time for as long as the intelligence chose. Then the pressure released. Mara blinked and the cockpit snapped back into ordinary physics. Blue sky, normal glare, familiar engine hum. Her hands were already locked on the yoke, knuckles white. The panel read green across the board, calm and indifferent. The logs were worse than her nerves. Flight data showed no forward movement for 34 minutes. No drift, no turn. A perfect hold at altitude, as if the plane had been pinned to a point in space. Engine parameters stayed normal the whole time. It was recorded like routine, like time had paused her and restarted without leaving fingerprints. Back on the ground, she went straight to Victor Hale. Someone had to confirm her track. Someone had to say they'd seen the gap. Instead, she found a blank space where Victor should have been. Not an empty chair. Gone. His desk didn't exist. The schedule board had no name in his slot. The staff list skipped cleanly from one coordinator to the next with no gap, no correction marks, no hint a line had been removed. Mara searched emails, flight plans, sign-offs, duty logs. The system returned nothing, not even an error. It was as if the database didn't recognize the letters in his name, and the people around her didn't react like someone had vanished. They reacted like she'd asked about a person who never worked there. Confusion, mild impatience, polite correction. Mara watched their faces and felt something colder than fear settle in her chest. This wasn't denial. It was absence engineered so completely it had rewritten the room. Only Mara still remembered Victor. That was the real proof the column wasn't just an anomaly in the sky. It could freeze machines like insects in amber. It could stop a plane without leaving a trace. And it could erase a man so thoroughly that even bureaucracy forgot how to say his name. Mara left the station with her flight log in hand and a single certainty sharpening into place. The column had let her go, but hadn't let Victor Hale. Mara didn't go public. She checked the data first. 34 minutes missing. Then Victor Hale was erased. No files, no emails, no one who truly remembered him. That was the real message. The column didn't just freeze aircraft. It could delete people. 6 months later, one text slipped through, VH. 2 letters saying he still existed somewhere, time couldn't reach. If reality can erase a person, the only defense is to make the story too widespread to erase. What would you do if someone vanished and everyone swore they never existed? Drop your theories in the comments. Subscribe for more. The call came in like any other. Loose cattle on Highway 16. A routine hazard in Texas hill country, the kind of thing that ends with reflective cones and irritated ranch hands. But Nina Caldwell arrived to a pasture that looked staged. 63 head of cattle stood in a ruler straight line, perfectly still, all facing the same patch of sky. No chewing, no swishing tails, no restless hooves, just a synchronized stillness that felt less like fear and more like instruction. And then her phone clock slid backward, minute by minute, as if time itself had been told to wait. Nina had been a Texas state trooper for 7 years. She trusted patterns, tire marks, heat shimmer, human lies. She knew what panic looked like and what fraud sounded like. That night, outside Medina and Bandera, she felt something worse than panic. She felt a system operating with calm confidence, tough, using the land, the animals, and the air above them like components. Hill country was supposed to be open space and honest darkness. Instead, it became a sealed room. Bo Harrington met her near the fence line, older hands shaking with a kind of dread that didn't ask for comfort. The cattle were not scattered across the road like the dispatch said. They were gathered, arranged, aligned, as if the pasture had turned into a runway. Nina stepped into the grass, and the world grew quieter in a way she couldn't explain. Not the normal quiet of rural Texas, but an engineered quiet. Insects still existed, the breeze should have existed, yet everything that made the night feel alive was suddenly muted, as if someone had lowered the volume on nature. A faint light pulsed on the roof of the cattle barn. It was dim, almost shy, but it had a rhythm. A slow heartbeat of illumination that made the barn look temporarily unreal. The strangest part wasn't the glow, it was the shadows. Fence posts, railing, even the cattle themselves cast shadows that leaned toward the light, not away from it. The pasture's logic had flipped. Nina caught herself staring at the ground, trying to force physics to behave. When she checked her phone again, it insisted the evening was still in the 7 o'clock hour. Her patrol car's dashboard clock agreed. Her wristwatch did not. Her sense of time did not. The sky looked like after 9, the deep kind of dark that arrives when the day is fully gone. Yet the devices around her kept rewinding, as if something overhead wanted the night to last longer. The clouds began to move with purpose. They didn't drift. They rotated, tightening into a perfect circle, a clean geometry that didn't belong to weather. The ring widened and stabilized, and at the center of it hung a shape so dark it seemed to drink starlight. Not a silhouette, not a shadow, a mass. Nina felt her throat close as the air temperature dropped fast, too fast, the kind of sudden chill that doesn't come from wind. Heat fled the yard in a single breath. Her skin tightened, her fingertips went numb. On the barn roof, figures appeared, tall, thin, wrong in their proportions. They didn't move like people crossing a surface. They repositioned with minimal motion, like frames missing between moments. Their bodies were long and spare, with angles that hinted at joints but refused to confirm them. Nina couldn't settle her eyes on faces. She could only register the fact of attention. The cattle did not run. They remained lined up like witnesses. The pulsing roof light brightened and the shadows bent harder toward it, as if gravity had begun taking instructions from illumination. Nina reached for procedure, for radio calls and backup requests, for anything that would turn this into an incident with a normal ending. But the air had a different plan. The sound around her thinned. The usual world felt farther away, like she was standing inside a bubble that didn't share rules with the road behind her. Then her mind slipped, not into sleep, not into unconsciousness, into somewhere adjacent, a sideways fall into a different awareness. Nina's awareness didn't fade like sleep. It slid sideways, as if the ranch and the night were still there, only separated by a thin pane of glass. One moment she was in hill country air that smelled of dust and cattle. The next, she stood under a purple-gray sky that felt too low, lit by light that came from everywhere at once and made shadows feel unnecessary. The ground held her weight without texture. In the distance, structures rose that didn't look built so much as grown, ribbed arcs and layered shells that pulsed faintly like a system breathing. No doors, no windows, no obvious machines. Yet the place felt like a controlled environment, a sterile field designed to test one thing. Her. A pressure gathered behind her eyes. Not pain at first, but a firm hand on the back of her thoughts, turning her attention where it wanted. Memories surfaced in clean sequence, pulled forward as if selected from labeled drawers. Her first day in uniform, crash scenes, night radios, the habit of scanning for danger even when nothing was happening. It didn't feel like interrogation, it felt like measurement. The presence was immense, not in size but in certainty. Meaning arrived without words, packed tight and unfolding inside her mind. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't kind. It simply observed with a calm so complete it made human fear feel loud. Then she understood what was happening at the ranch. They weren't interested in cattle as livestock. They were interested in what cattle did to people. The protective instinct, the way a rancher guarded his herd, the way a trooper stepped between harm and someone else. That was the signal they were studying, the human reflex to shield. And Bo Harrington was the target. A fixed period, 47 days. Not a threat in the human sense, more like a clinical decision. Nina sensed that the bargaining itself was part of the process, to see who would offer themselves, to see what humans did when the danger wasn't a gun or a storm, but an intelligence that could rewrite the rules of the room. So she pushed her intent forward like a badge in the dark and offered a trade. Not pleading, structure. She presented herself as a better variable, trained observation, stress discipline, a mind conditioned to record detail. If they wanted to study protection and empathy, she could give them a cleaner sample than Bo, and she could survive the process long enough to remember it. The presence evaluated her with frightening neutrality. The pressure behind her eyes intensified, and the world seemed to pause on the edge of an answer. Agreement arrived without warmth. It felt like a latch releasing. The purple-gray sky deepened. The grown structures seemed to lean toward her awareness. She felt herself being opened, not harmed, but unfolded. Layers of memory and identity briefly exposed, scanned, and stacked back into place. For an instant, she saw a wider grid beyond this space, moving lights in the dark, corridors of brightness connecting points like routes on a map that wasn't meant for humans. Then it snapped shut. Nina sensed the ranch again like a distant sound through walls. She understood she had only a second to leave proof in the human world, a single thread that might survive what came next. Her last act of control was practical, not heroic, forcing a message out to her department before the connection collapsed. And then the barn, the cattle, the rotating clouds, all of it fell away. Not destroyed, simply removed, as if a square of the world had been folded inward. The study began. Nina came back on Christmas morning, alone in wet grass with no tracks, like the night had been removed and put back wrong. Her body was fine, but time didn't feel straight anymore. Some moments arrived like memories from the future. She kept the job because routine was the only thing that still felt real. Officially, nothing happened. When she tried to write it down, the details slipped, turning soft and ordinary, like the truth didn't want a record. Now, on empty stretches of Highway 16, she doesn't scan for headlights. She watches the sky for seams. The scariest part wasn't what they showed her. It was how calm she felt agreeing to it. What if the bargain never ended? It just moved inside her. If your shadow ever pointed the wrong way, would you keep driving or stop and look up? Drop your theory in the comments. Subscribe for more missing time and repeating patterns. This isn't fiction, it's a warning. Everyone assumes the desert is empty and predictable, but OSR-19 behaves like a doorway that ignores distance, ignores clocks, and rewrites what radar is allowed to see. The moment Beck notices a perfect 1.2-mile blind stretch that makes vehicles vanish and reappear, he realizes the real threat is not what is on the road, it is what the road is. Beck Molina is a Border Patrol radar technician with 8 years on the job at a remote northern monitoring station. During a late shift maintenance check, he spots a clean, consistent blind stretch mapped perfectly onto Old Service Road 19, known on station maps as OSR 19. On the scope, vehicles entering that segment vanish completely, then reappear at the far end with no bridging track, no drift, no scatter. Beck runs every standard test, swaps channels, checks power, recalibrates filters. The blind zone holds its shape. In archive storage, he finds an older handwritten note tucked into a previous technician log. The line is short and heavy on the page. OSR 19, do not ask questions. At 11:54 p.m., Patrol Unit 72, driven by Harper Velasquez, rolls toward OSR 19 on routine coverage, and Beck watches the blip with the quiet discipline of 8 years on radar. But tonight the blind stretch looks less like a glitch and more like a boundary someone placed with intent, because its edge is too clean, too exact, and it sits on the road like a rule. At a steady 43 miles per hour, the 1.2-mile segment should take about 1 minute and 40 seconds. So Beck counts, then the track hits the boundary and drops out instantly, not fading and not scattering, simply erased, while a tight band of interference blooms in the same shape every time as if the system is signing its work. 5 minutes pass, then 10, and Beck calls Harper while rerunning diagnostics that now feel pointless, and Harper answers calmly and says she entered OSR 19 about 30 seconds ago, forcing Beck to confirm the log timestamps that show 11 minutes have already passed. Under her voice, Beck hears a thin harmonic wobble riding the carrier signal like a second presence breathing through the radio, and Harper adds that her wristwatch has stopped, that the dashboard clock is flickering toward 12:31, and that her headlights look trapped, the beam shortening as if darkness is drinking it. When Beck asks what she sees ahead, Harper says the roadside reflectors are repeating, the same marker appearing twice, and beyond the shoulder she can make out tall, gaunt shapes spaced evenly in the desert, not moving yet somehow closer each time she blinks. And then her words begin to arrive delayed and doubled, as if two versions of the same moment are overlapping. And in the overlap, Beck catches a low whisper that Harper insists she did not say. A steady phrase pressed close to the mic that sounds like an instruction being tested. Beck realizes the blind zone is not only hiding vehicles from radar, it is placing observers along the road and inside the signal itself, and whatever is there is listening to how a human voice reacts to fear. Beck drives to OSR 19 without triggering a full station alert, and the service road cuts into the desert night like a deliberate incision. Then he finds Harper's vehicle parked on the shoulder with all lights off and no engine sound, and Harper sits rigid behind the wheel with eyes wide open and a smile stretched too wide to be voluntary, as if her face has been set for display. The air around the cabin feels edited, colder than the surrounding desert, and when Beck steps onto the blind segment, his own vehicle begins to glide forward at a steady 5 miles per hour, even with the brake engaged and the gear in park, while the asphalt wakes with faint phosphorescent seams that trace angular patterns under the tires like circuitry. Digital displays flicker and lock at 12:31 a.m. The GPS loops, and the sky over the road flattens into a dull sheet. Then the low hum returns, and Beck sees the first alien figures clearly. Tall and gaunt silhouettes placed at perfect intervals along both sides of the road, absorbing the glow instead of reflecting it, their heads angled toward the vehicles as if they are reading occupants rather than watching traffic. The radio clicks on by itself, and Harper's voice comes through, warped and heavy, telling Beck to keep driving and not to stop. But beneath her words, another tone rides the signal, a thin, layered whisper that echoes his own breathing a beat late. And when Beck looks at Harper, he sees tears running while her smile holds, and her pupils shift toward the roadside figures as if she is tracking them even when she cannot move. As the car glides deeper, the figures do not step yet. Distance collapses, their outlines sliding closer as if the road is folding space to bring them near, and Beck feels a cold wash pass through his hands like water through glass. Then he notices a second silhouette reflected in the windshield for a fraction of a second, too tall to be human and positioned where no one is sitting, and he understands with sudden certainty that the alien presence is not outside the vehicle alone. It is in the lane, in the light under the asphalt, and inside the cabin, testing how far it can take control before anyone dares to stop. They burst out of OSR 19 the first time with Harper still crying behind that impossible smile, and Beck's hands still cold from the wash that passed through sealed glass. So when Desert Sound returns, it feels less like safety and more like a curtain dropping after an audience has been studied, and the station clock turns their unease into proof, because 53 minutes are missing from a 1.2-mile crossing while the speedometer never left 0 miles per hour. Beck opens the radar logs expecting only absence, but he sees their tracks stacked in multiple positions at once before vanishing. And in the same slice of time, he finds thin vertical returns aligned along both shoulders at perfect spacing, stronger than before, as if the corridor briefly allowed the alien watchers to register on the scope, then hid them again. They go back the next afternoon, and the second they touch the threshold, all sound dies while vibration stays. The phosphorescent seams under the asphalt sharpen into bright angular cells that pulse in a slow rhythm, and the alien figures appear in close rows, tall and gaunt with smooth plain faces where lines of light sweep like scanning beams, while smaller glints hover above the road just ahead of the windshield as if guiding the car. Each time the vehicle passes through a figure, the cabin lights dip, the radio clicks, a cold surge crawls through Beck's palms, and Harper's mouth moves with no sound while her smile tries to climb again against her will. Then the radio carries a second layered whisper that is not Harper and not Beck, repeating Harper's name in a measured cadence as if the corridor is confirming identity. The vehicle field returns and it is arranged. Patrol units and civilian cars half-buried or hovering, duplicates across different years, and around the densest clusters stand more figures in tight rings, like keepers, while silhouettes flicker inside cabin reflections, appearing in the rear view for a blink, then between the seats, and Beck catches a clear windshield reflection of a tall shape exactly where no one is sitting, and the cabin temperature drops as if a door has opened in the air. Beck refuses to stop and refuses to turn back, drifting forward until OSR 19 releases them. And when sound returns, Harper cannot remember the final moments, and Beck finds a pale dust print on the inside of the passenger window shaped like a hand with too many finger lengths, with the glass beneath it faintly warm as if held from the other side. Outside the blind stretch, Both Beck and Harper notice faint geometric symbols glowing under the skin of their palms with no pain and no burn, and they lock the radar logs, the recorder, and the photographs inside the station's safe, while Beck writes one private line he will never file. OSR-19 breaks rules. Months later, the marks flare brighter on a moonless night, and the radio wakes itself with that same low hum, leaving one question that refuses to die. If OSR-19 bends time and copies vehicles across positions, is it a natural anomaly, a classified experiment, or a deliberate system built by something watching from the other side? Comment your theory, then hit like and subscribe. The truck vanished in an instant. The lane went empty like it had never been there. And when Grant checked his watch, he realized 15 minutes of his night had been cut out cleanly. The only thing left behind was Sierra Mays' final video frame, her face drowned in blue light inside a cab that looked completely empty to the naked eye. At 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, Officer Grant Reich is running patrol on Highway 207, roughly 30 miles from the Oklahoma line, a flat stretch of Texas Panhandle where the darkness feels wide and the road noise is usually honest. Then his headlights catch a full-size 18-wheeler stopped dead in the northbound lane, with no hazard lights, no flares, no reflective triangles, just a heavy shape planted in the middle of the road like it has been placed there to be found. Grant pulls behind it, angles his cruiser lights for visibility, and expects the usual: a groggy driver, a mechanical failure, maybe a medical event. But the first detail that unsettles him is the total absence of human reaction, because no cab light turns on and no door opens and no silhouette moves behind the glass. Grant approaches with his flashlight and sees the truck is locked tight, the mirrors still, the windshield dark, and when he checks the cab and the sleeper area through the windows, he sees only empty seats and empty bunks and a dashboard that looks powered down. Then he radios dispatch for the owner information and hears a reply that bends the moment into something stranger, because the registered operator, Sierra Mays, is on the phone right now, and she is reporting that she is inside the cab. She can see the police lights, but she cannot see any officer walking toward her truck. And she is asking why no one is opening the door. Grant asks dispatch to patch Sierra through directly, and when he hears her voice, it is not distant or unclear. It is immediate and frightened, and she says she has been sitting there for 20 to 30 minutes after deciding to pull over because the air inside the cab suddenly felt heavy and the road ahead seemed to ripple. Then she says she watched the cruiser arrive and stop behind her, yet the side mirror shows no one exiting. He asks Sierra to describe the cab, and she says there is a blue electronic light flooding the space without casting shadow, a glow that feels like it is coming from every surface at once, and from nowhere at all. And as she speaks, Grant looks at the truck with his own eyes and sees no blue glow on the glass and no spill on the asphalt. But when she agrees to switch to a video call, the screen in Grant's hand shows Sierra sitting upright in the driver's seat with her face washed in that blue light, her hands shaking on the steering wheel, her eyes tracking the flashing police lights outside, and the impossible contradiction locks into place, because the video shows a living person trapped in the cab while his direct view through the window shows an empty seat. Then the time slip appears, because Sierra tells him her clock reads 1:37 a.m., while Grant's cruiser clock has already rolled to 2:31 a.m., and she insists she has not been stopped long. Yet Grant checks her location history through dispatch and sees the GPS ping has been stationary far longer than she believes, more than an hour and a half, and as the call continues, the video stutters in tiny jumps, not like poor reception, but like frames being removed. And each stutter briefly sharpens the blue glow into geometric bands that crawl across the ceiling and down the window frames, as if the light is scanning the cabin. Grant decides the contradiction ends only when he gets the door open, so he moves back to the driver's side lock with his entry tool. And as he sets the metal against the seam, the wind around the highway drops out as if someone has turned off the atmosphere, leaving a silence so complete that even dust in his cruiser lights seems to stop drifting, and the quiet feels pressurized, as if the world is holding its breath. His radio clicks once. Then a voice comes through that is not Sierra and not dispatch. A voice with a strange cadence and a tone that never fully settles into any familiar accent. And it speaks as if reading from a rule book that does not care about his authority, telling him to step away, telling him that the civilian is not in his vehicle, telling him that the civilian is here. Grant freezes, because his body understands before his mind can organize it. And on the phone, Sierra begins to cry harder and says the blue light is thickening. She can feel it on her skin like static. And behind her in the video, the sleeper curtain lifts slightly, even though nothing moves it, revealing a deeper darkness that looks too deep for the small space. And then Grant forces his hands to move again and applies pressure to the lock. The moment the tool bites, the entire truck disappears without sound or displacement. No tire marks, no oil smell, no fading engine heat, just an empty strip of highway that makes his flashlight beam feel suddenly useless. And Grant staggers backward into the void of space where 40,000 pounds of metal had been, and his radio hisses into silence. When the wind returns, Grant checks his watch and sees 15 minutes have vanished, and his cruiser dashcam shows a gap in footage that begins at the instant the air went still, as if the road itself refused to be recorded. And in the empty lane, his headlights reveal nothing but clean asphalt. Yet on the phone, the call has dropped, and dispatch is calling his unit name with rising urgency, as if he has been gone longer than he can account for. In the days that follow, Grant tries to file a report that fits inside policy language, but every sentence collapses under its own contradiction, because the truck was present and absent at the same time, because the occupant was visible only through a screen, because time peeled away 15 minutes in a single breath. And the more he repeats the facts, the more he feels that voice on the radio was not warning him, it was classifying him. A few nights later, he receives a quiet invitation to a support group in Amarillo, and in a small room filled with folding chairs and paper cups, Grant hears his story reflected back through other mouths. Ranchers, mechanics, a volunteer firefighter, a dispatcher, all describing blue light with no shadow, absolute stillness in the air, and the feeling of being observed from angles that should not exist. The frequency is increasing across the panhandle, that vehicles return days or weeks later with electrical systems dead as if something drained them through the wiring. That paint and plastic show signs of intense ultraviolet exposure, and that lab tests on scraped residue have revealed metal isotopes that do not match known terrestrial ratios. Those who tried to shoot the light or force their way through it suffered brain injury, lost speech, or woke with language stripped out of their mouths as if the mechanism that took them could also remove the tool they used to describe it. Grant leaves that meeting with an unspoken certainty that Sierra is not an isolated case. She is an example, and the alien presence is using the highway as a controlled environment, placing paradox in the road to see who will approach and who will remember. 16 days later, Grant returns to Highway 207 before dawn, and the blue light blooms over the asphalt with no shadow, flattening distance until the road looks mapped by faint geometric grids. Then his radio turns on by itself, and the same non-human cadence states, "Sierra Mays is alive, preserved, and under study, and she will be returned when the study is complete." And his dash screen flashes a single frozen frame of Sierra's face lit in blue before collapsing into static. The voice tells Grant he has been marked because he saw and retained the memory, and that his role is to carry the account. And he drives away understanding the highway is not a place anymore. It is a channel that can store people like data. If Sierra can exist on video while the cab stays empty, what is the corridor actually moving? Share your theory, then hit like and subscribe. The Mojave went silent, and the CB line held its breath. A white sphere rose beside Lucas, watching without eyes. Then time snapped forward, as if someone skipped frames. Lucas had driven freight routes for 11 years. He hauled electronics across the Mojave at night. Interstate 40 felt endless, flat, and exposed. The cab smelled like diesel and hot wiring. The CB crackled with bored voices and dead air. That Thursday in October 2019, he left Victorville late. Needles waited far ahead in darkness. Near Daggett, the desert changed without warning. Wind died and the road sounded muted. Even the engine felt distant, like it was underwater. Lucas checked mirrors and saw nothing behind him. Around 11:15, wind dropped to nothing. The desert felt muted, like sound got absorbed. Lucas saw dust hang in beams, then fall straight down. The CB went quiet, then returned with thin hiss. A westbound rig passed, headlights flaring in fogless air. An unknown driver broke in on CB, voice tight. He said something sat on the road ahead. Lucas slowed his truck and kept both hands locked. The lane stripe glowed faintly under his beams. A pure white sphere rested on the stripe, perfectly round. It looked 4 feet wide, clean-edged and solid. It cast no shadow on pavement or lane paint. It gave off no heat shimmer at all. Lucas rolled closer, heart pounding behind ribs. The sphere lifted 2 feet, as if noticing him. It hovered without wobble, with a faint blue rim. The rim crackled like welding sparks, yet silent. Lucas raised his phone and filmed through the windshield. The screen showed glare, then sudden black. He kept filming, blinking through tears. The sphere remained bright outside, yet invisible to file. The hum began under tires, then inside his teeth. His chest tightened with each pulse, then released. The sphere jumped sideways without traveling. It snapped to a new spot, then back again. For 1 second, Lucas saw an outline beside it. It looked tall and slender, shaped from darkness. Long fingers hung too low, almost touching the stripe. The outline turned toward Lucas and held. Lucas threw the truck into gear and pulled away fast. Mirrors showed nothing chasing him, yet the hum followed inside the cab. At a truck stop, Lucas checked the receipt timestamp. His log time disagreed by more than an hour. The gap felt clean, like someone edited tape. 3 days later, the sphere returned near Lello at midnight. No wind moved, and the highway sounded padded and distant. Another driver called it in, voice shaking on CB. Lucas was nearby and turned back to confirm. The white sphere hovered above the center stripe again. Its blue rim flickered, then steadied like a held spark. Lucas filmed through glass, keeping his hands visible. The playback showed empty asphalt and dark horizon. The sphere split into 2 matching spheres, clean and silent. They separated without traveling through the space between. Chest pressure hit Lucas in 2 alternating pulses. The hum vibrated the seat frame and steering column. A tall, slender outline appeared between the 2 lights. It looked too narrow to be human. Long fingers unfolded, then folded again, slowly. The outline faced Lucas, then dissolved into the glow. Lucas checked his dash clock and felt sick. 90 minutes were missing, cleanly removed. By late October, drivers reported spheres across the Mojave segment. They described shadowless light resting on lane stripes. Some described silent arcs above ridgelines, swapping positions instantly. One driver recorded from his cab near Amboy. The video showed an empty road, despite blinding light outside. On November 17th, the northern horizon flared white in waves. The waves rolled without sound across distant ridges. Lucas stopped with other trucks and watched, frozen. Dozens of spheres formed a curved lattice in the sky. A few tall figures stood on the shoulder line, motionless. Their black eyes reflected no headlights at all. When Lucas moved again, 4 hours were missing. A month later, Dustin drove the shortcut again after midnight. The air went still near the same mile stretch. Temperature dropped fast inside the cab. The engine died cleanly, without any struggle. 2 spheres appeared first, then 4 more. They formed a wide arc around the truck. Tall figures stepped from the dim glow quietly. More figures followed, lining the shoulder and median. They were thin, too tall, and perfectly balanced. Their heads were elongated and smooth. Their eyes were black and almond-shaped. Their skin looked pale gray with a matte, wet sheen. Long fingers flexed with narrow-jointed segments. They moved with smooth, efficient precision. One figure stood in the lane, centered in headlights. It raised a hand, and Dustin stopped breathing. The hum pressed into his ribs in steady pulses. Frost flowered again across the windshield in fractal geometry. Symbols formed within the frost, drawn by hovering fingertips. A voice entered his mind, cold and exact. "You are marked, you will remember." The figures stepped closer without footfalls. They surrounded the cab like a quiet ring. Dustin watched a finger point at his chest. Another finger pointed at his throat. Another finger pointed at his forehead. The spheres brightened once, then dimmed to a low glow. The dashboard clock froze, then jumped ahead in blocks. Dustin woke at a rest stop, shaking hard. 6 hours were missing from receipts and device logs. His cab smelled like ozone and cold metal. His tongue tasted like pennies for hours. The hum lingered behind his eyes all day. A quiet research circle found him through trucker channels. They asked for his receipts and dash logs. They shared reports and symptom lists in plain envelopes. They warned him to avoid mirrors after encounters. Many witnesses had headaches, tinnitus, and memory gaps afterward. Some had triangular scars in mirrored placement. Some heard tones in teeth for weeks. Some saw doubles in reflective glass. One man forgot his own address for days. During a fourth encounter, 6 spheres formed a ring over desert ground. The ring opened like an iris without any sound. 5 or 6 entities appeared inside the opening. They stood taller than before, with longer arms. Their fingers fanned wider, counting invisible measures. A sequence of images hit Dustin without warning. He saw grids of roads and moving vehicles. He saw human faces fading into blank calm. He saw a boundary folding between places. The entities sent one clear concept into his mind. Time is ending. Choice is required. The hum became a heavy pressure, then weightlessness. 2 days later, Dustin woke in a Las Vegas hospital. He remembered a beam and a falling sensation. Doctors found fine white dust in his clothes. His phone held black frames and broken time codes. After that, encounters stopped for 6 months. Then Nevada lost power statewide for 47 minutes. Darkness hit like a curtain across every ridge. The hum returned inside Dustin's teeth immediately. 2 white spheres appeared above his street, shadowless. Tall figures stood between parked cars, perfectly still. A cold voice entered his mind, calm and final. The choice is now. Neighbors later reported his porch light blinking without power. A door camera saved only black frames that night. When power returned, Dustin was gone. His truck sat idling in the driveway, warm. The driver door hung open, swinging slowly. No footprints marked the dust outside. His receipts folder lay on the seat, neatly stacked. The last note inside read 47, then stopped. No one confirmed where Lucas went after Nevada that week. Dispatch showed normal pings, then sudden blank gaps. His phone never rang again afterward. His last log ended mid-sentence, then stopped. If spheres follow you home, what comes next? Do they erase, replace, or relocate witnesses? Share your theory, then like and subscribe for the next case. A dead zone lasted 47 minutes on radar. Dustin lived 3 missing hours instead. Something tall and faceless waited beside the spheres. Dustin ran long-haul routes between Las Vegas and Reno. He carried construction loads and kept night schedules. On June 17, 2020, dispatch sent him a shortcut. The route skirted the Tonopah test range in open desert. He reached Goldfield around 10 that night. The air felt wrong before he saw anything. The radio crackle thinned, then dropped into dead silence. 2 white lights hovered ahead, low above the roadway. They were not headlights, and they cast no shadows. As he approached, his phone lost signal instantly. His radio died, and even static disappeared. The lights resolved into 2 spheres, floating 3 meters high. Each sphere held a faint blue rim, steady and sharp. Cabin temperature dropped fast, biting through his jacket. Frost filmed the inside glass in thin sheets. The diesel engine cut off by itself, without a sputter. Absolute silence filled the cab, heavy and pressurized. A low hum rose through the seat and into his teeth. Dustin felt his chest tighten in slow pulses. In the dim glow, a tall, slender figure stepped forward. Its limbs looked too long and too narrow. Its face seemed smooth, with no clear features. It moved with steady efficiency, never rushing. Another figure appeared behind it, then another. They held position beside the spheres, like a line. Dustin could not move, not even his hands. His eyes stayed open, yet his body refused. The spheres brightened once, then dimmed again. The nearest figure reached the driver door and stopped. Long fingers hovered near the handle without touching. Then the light snapped off as if switched. The engine restarted by itself, idling smoothly. Wind returned in a sudden rush outside. The frost on glass melted too quickly, leaving streaks. Dustin drove hard toward Tonopah without looking back. At a station, he checked the clock and receipts. Almost 3 hours were missing from his memory. 2 weeks later, Dustin returned with cameras and spare batteries. He reached the same shoulder at 10:52 p.m. The air went still before any light appeared. 2 spheres formed above the asphalt, perfectly aligned. They looked larger now, and oddly faceted. Their skin swallowed headlight glare, leaving no reflection. A blue rim held steady, sharp, and silent. The hum returned and pressed behind his eyes. Frost crawled along vents and across the steering wheel. Tall figures stood beside the spheres, arranged like sentries. They were thin, too tall, and motionless at first. One stepped forward with long, jointed fingers. Its face looked smooth, without features, yet somehow watching. A voice entered his mind, cold and measured. "Do not move, you are being observed." His hands clenched, yet his arms felt far away. The figure raised a hand toward the windshield. Ice flowered instantly into geometric fractals across the glass. A fingertip traced symbols through the frost, without pressure. Dustin filmed, keeping his face visible in frame. Every file saved black, with clean gaps in the audio. Even the clip timestamps jumped forward in uneven steps. When the spheres blinked out, the frost vanished too quickly. Dustin drove hard until Tonopah lights appeared. At dawn, an envelope waited under his wiper blade. Inside were radar scope prints from June 17. His truck track entered a hollow, then vanished completely. The hollow lasted exactly 47 minutes on the chart. Receipts still showed nearly 3 missing hours that night. A note warned, "Do not ask for names here." Another line read, "Reports now arrive 3 times weekly." One print showed faint returns circling the hollow edge. They folded into a triangle, then into a tight ring. A month later, Dustin drove the shortcut again after midnight. The air went still near the same mile stretch. Temperature dropped fast inside the cab. The engine died cleanly, without any struggle. 2 spheres appeared first, then 4 more. They formed a wide arc around the truck. Tall figures stepped from the dim glow quietly. More figures followed, lining the shoulder and median. They were thin, too tall, and perfectly balanced. Their heads were elongated and smooth. Their eyes were black and almond-shaped. Their skin looked pale gray with a matte, wet sheen. Long fingers flexed with narrow-jointed segments. They moved with smooth, efficient precision. One figure stood in the lane, centered in headlights. It raised a hand, and Dustin stopped breathing. The hum pressed into his ribs in steady pulses. Frost flowered again across the windshield in fractal geometry. Symbols formed within the frost, drawn by hovering fingertips. A voice entered his mind, cold and exact. "You are marked, you will remember." The figure stepped closer without footfalls. They surrounded the cab like a quiet ring. Dustin watched a finger point at his chest. Another finger pointed at his throat. Another finger pointed at his forehead. The spheres brightened once, then dimmed to a low glow. The dashboard clock froze, then jumped ahead in blocks. Dustin woke at a rest stop, shaking hard. 6 hours were missing from receipts and device logs. His cab smelled like ozone and cold metal. His tongue tasted like pennies for hours. The hum lingered behind his eyes all day. A quiet research circle found him through trucker channels. They asked for his receipts and dash logs. They shared reports and symptom lists in plain envelopes. They warned him to avoid mirrors after encounters. Many witnesses had headaches, tinnitus, and memory gaps afterward. Some had triangular scars in mirrored placement. Some heard tones in teeth for weeks. Some saw doubles in reflective glass. One man forgot his own address for days. During a 4th encounter, 6 spheres formed a ring over desert ground. The ring opened like an iris, without any sound. 5 or 6 entities appeared inside the opening. They stood taller than before, with longer arms. Their fingers fanned wider, counting invisible measures. A sequence of images hit Dustin without warning. He saw grids of roads and moving vehicles. He saw human faces fading into blank calm. He saw a boundary folding between places. The entities sent one clear concept into his mind. Time is ending, choice is required. The hum became a heavy pressure, then weightlessness. 2 days later, Dustin woke in a Las Vegas hospital. He remembered a beam and a falling sensation. Doctors found fine white dust in his clothes. His phone held black frames and broken time codes. After that, encounters stopped for 6 months. Then Nevada lost power statewide for 47 minutes. Darkness hit like a curtain across every ridge. The hum returned inside Dustin's teeth immediately. 2 white spheres appeared above his street, shadowless. Streetlights stayed dark, yet shadows moved across his driveway. A sphere hovered above the roofline, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Frost formed geometric petals on his windows, then vanished. The air smelled of ozone and wet stone. Tall figures stood between parked cars, perfectly still. A cold voice entered his mind, calm and final. The choice is now. His phone lit up, showing 10:52 p.m. again. The time display blinked, then froze on the same minute. A tall figure stood at the porch steps facing inward. Its long fingers traced symbols in air above the railing. Those symbols glowed briefly, then sank into the wood grain. A second figure appeared behind it, matching his height exactly. Its face looked blank, yet familiar in the porch glass. Dustin tried to shout, but his voice stayed trapped. Neighbors later reported his porch light blinking without power. A door camera saved only black frames that night. Inside the cab, the hum rose until his vision shimmered. He later remembered weightlessness and a metallic taste. When power returned, Dustin was gone. His truck sat idling in the driveway, warm. The driver door hung open, swinging slowly. No footprints marked the dust outside. Only a thin line of white dust crossed porch boards. It ended at the door, then continued inside the cab. His steering wheel felt cold, despite the warm engine. The radio hissed a tone, then spoke his name once. His receipts folder lay on the seat, neatly stacked. The tone matched the hum from desert nights. His mailbox held a new envelope, sealed without glue. Inside was a single black frame printed on paper. It showed his porch, empty, with a sphere above. The last note inside read 47, then stopped. Dustin kept every receipt, gap, and black file in one box. After the blackout, that box was all that remained. No one proved he lived or died afterward. The number 47 stayed behind like a signature. If they can take a driver from his own porch, what does the choice actually mean for us? Comment your theory, then like and subscribe for the next case. At 3:17, Carlos's radio inhaled and exhaled with no signal. A UFO hovered above Bunker 12, pulsing blue through the darkness. Something tall waited inside, and his headlights forgot how to shine. Carlos Rodriguez followed one rule on night patrols. He never worked midnight on a new moon. On March 8th, he broke it for extra money. He wanted a gaming computer for his daughter. The northern sectors felt newer, quieter, and farther from help. No phone signal reached Sector E. The darkness that night felt thick enough to hold. Carlos started the midnight loop with a tight jaw. The new moon hid every ridge and marker. Sector lights sat far apart and felt useless. His tires whispered over gravel and dry salt dust. The radio hissed, then breathed like a hidden animal. Inhale arrived steady, then exhale dragged longer. He checked the channel knob twice, then froze. No signal should breathe with that rhythm. He drove past the A gate and counted fence posts. He logged each pump pad and each storage row. The air inside the cab thickened, then thinned again. His ears popped once, then rang with faint pressure. His headlights looked weaker with every mile. The gauges stayed calm and refused to explain it. The dash clock ticked, then skipped a second. Then it returned, pretending nothing happened. A pale blue pulse appeared in his left mirror. It hovered above the road behind him. It held the same distance like a measured tether. Carlos sped up and watched it match perfectly. Carlos slowed and watched it slow without delay. He turned at an access fork, and it turned with him. It never swung wide like a truck would. It never corrected like a helicopter would. It moved like it already knew his route. He killed the cabin light and watched the pulse again. It stayed blue, clean, and edged. It did not blink like a tower beacon. It did not smear like a flare in wind. The pulse slid closer to his window. The radio breathing grew louder beside his seat. Carlos felt watched from above his roofline too. A wide shadow crossed the stars, then held steady. He tried to shake it with procedure. He stopped and cut his engine. The pulse stopped and waited behind him. He reversed slowly and the pulse slid backward too. He turned his headlights off completely. The pulse stayed visible and unchanged. The breathing continued in the radio, still timed. Carlos tasted metal and felt ozone in dry air. He started the engine and rolled forward again. The pulse followed, patient, as if guiding him north. Bunker 12 rose ahead like a black tooth. The blue pulse moved first. It waited above the bunker. The shadow around it widened. It flattened across the stars. It hovered low, perfectly steady. No wind stirred beneath it. No dust lifted from gravel. The radio breathing filled the cab. It sounded closer than his own lungs. Carlos felt pressure behind his eyes. His tongue tasted metal. The windshield glass tingled with static. His headlights dimmed until the road vanished. The engine died mid-roll. The cab went dead instantly. Every LED went dark at once. The breathing continued anyway. It now lived inside his skull. A blue glow pulsed near the bunker wall. It rose and fell like deep water. Frost crept along his window edges. The cab temperature dropped hard. His breath fogged, then vanished. Something stepped down from the hovering glow. It was tall, narrow, and wrong. Its limbs were too long. Its joints were thin and hinged. Its head looked smooth and stretched. Its eyes were black and unblinking. It moved without footfalls. Gravel never cracked beneath it. It faced the bunker door and raised one hand. The latch clicked without any touch. The door opened 6 inches. It stopped and held. Blue light breathed through the gap. A thin hiss rode the rhythm. It sounded like speech without syllables. Carlos felt a clean pull in thoughts. His body obeyed before refusal. He opened the truck door. Cold air bit through his jacket. The ground felt tilted. The alien stood at the crack. It waited like a handler. It turned slightly, inviting him closer. Carlos walked forward, sleepwalking. The blue glow painted his hands. His watch face flashed once. Then it froze at 3:17. He reached for the door edge. His fingers shook but still moved. The alien leaned back, making room. The bunker air breathed out at him. Carlos stepped toward the bunker without choosing the step. The air felt pressurized, then hollow, then pressurized again. Cold seeped through his jacket and into his bones. The radio breathing followed him out of the cab. It did not fade with distance. The alien waited at the cracked doorway, perfectly still. Carlos saw blue light crawl along the concrete seam. He smelled ozone, metal, and something sterile. The watch on his wrist stopped at 3:17. The threshold felt like walking through deep water. His skin prickled, then went numb. A low hum rose from the floor into his teeth. A thin hiss threaded through the breathing, tight and sharp. He heard faint clicks inside the walls, like tiny relays. The corridor looked longer than the bunker should allow. The blue light did not reflect like normal light. His shadow disappeared, then reappeared, then disappeared again. A perfect frost circle waited on the concrete floor. The edge looked cut with a tool. Crystal branches formed sharp geometric patterns. His boot stepped onto the ring, and pain spiked upward. It ran from shin to knee in one flash. His vision shimmered as if heat rose from ice. He tried to lift his foot and could not. The hum pulsed, then paused, then pulsed again. Each pulse tightened his chest like a clamp. The alien moved deeper, and Carlos followed like a leash. Blue lines ran along wall seams like veins. Symbols lit briefly, then rearranged themselves. He could not hold their shapes in memory. The breathing rhythm slowed until it matched his heartbeat. Then it led his heartbeat again. The corridor widened into a room with no clear corners. The ceiling felt higher than any bunker ceiling. Images slammed into his mind in hard bursts. He saw the desert mapped by grids from above. He saw an ocean lit blue under black sky. He saw smooth rooms with angles that refused perspective. He saw humans frozen mid-step, eyes open, mouths silent. He saw a clock hand split into 2 hands. He heard a chorus of distant machinery, steady and ancient. His stomach turned as if gravity shifted sideways. A human voice cut through the radio like a rope. Unit 4, respond now. Repeat, respond now. The command snapped his mind back into place. The blue glow faltered for 1 beat. Carlos saw the alien closer than before, inches away. Its eyes reflected nothing, not even blue light. Then it faded backward into the glow. Carlos stumbled, turned, and ran for the truck. Behind him, the bunker door breathed once more. Back at the station, they showed him the recordings. For 66 minutes, Carlos never left the seat. He sat rigid, hands on the wheel, eyes unblinking. Yet the bunker camera showed the door open in blue light. Carlos understood he lost an hour while staying awake. What do you think the bunker did to him? Comment your theory, then like and subscribe for more Midnight Facility Files. At 2:31, 2 low UFO lights split above the desert. Marcus Holland's voice turned metallic, then stopped sounding human. Unit 9 found his truck running, and something watched from darkness. Marcus Holland patrolled alone along the reserve's broken service trails. He knew the desert by radio calls, gates, and mile markers. Dispatch heard him nightly, a steady voice in dead air. Some nights, the air answered back with tones nobody owned. Older agents joked about missing minutes near that horizon line. Holland never joked, and he never chased lights without proof. Then at 2:17, he checked in like nothing waited ahead. Holland rolled the service trail at a steady crawl. The moonless desert looked carved from charcoal. Headlights cut two narrow tunnels through scrub. The fence line vanished outside their reach. His radio carried routine checks and calm replies. Then the background hiss began pulsing. It rose and fell like controlled breathing. He tapped the speaker and checked the mic. The pulse stayed perfectly timed. He switched channels and returned to base. The pulse followed him across every band. He muted the radio and it continued faintly. The cab air felt heavy and dry. His ears popped with sudden pressure. His eyes watered for no reason. The windshield tingled with static. Sand beside the trail stopped drifting. Distant brush stopped moving, despite steady wind earlier. Even his engine sounded slightly muted. The dash clock ticked, then stalled briefly. It resumed without explanation. The minute hand jumped forward, then corrected itself. He checked the glove box watch, and it disagreed. He swallowed and tasted metal in his mouth. At 2:31, he called dispatch with urgency. He reported an orange-white object ahead. It hovered low at the horizon line. It sat about 50 feet above sand. It did not drift with wind at all. The brightness looked clean and sharp. No glow touched the ground below. The stars behind it looked dimmer, like swallowed light. Holland said it was not a plane. Holland said it was not a flare. He said it felt too close for distance. His next sentence sounded wrong. A metallic ring wrapped each word. A hollow echo followed half a beat later. Some consonants doubled with exact timing. Static climbed behind his voice, then dropped. Holland said the object brightened again. He said the air tasted like pennies. He said his chest felt squeezed. He said the trail markers looked warped. He said his mirrors showed a darker sky. He asked if dispatch heard breathing. Dispatch heard it and stayed silent. Holland said the sound matched his own exhale. Holland followed the object by truck only. He never opened the door. The glow slid along the trail ahead. It stayed just beyond his headlights. It moved like it knew the path. He slowed and it slowed too. He sped up and it pulled away. It kept the same distance, measured and calm. The radio pulse grew louder each minute. His phone screen dimmed, then died. His dash clock flashed 2:31 repeatedly. The engine sounded normal, yet the truck felt heavy. The steering wheel tugged toward the glow. His mirrors showed empty darkness behind. Yet he felt close company. The light split into two identical orbs overhead. They held 30 feet apart, perfectly level. Holland said the truck slowed by itself. His foot stayed off the brake. The orbs brightened until sand looked colorless. The air inside the cab turned icy. His breath fogged and hung too long. His window glass grew a thin frost edge. A darker mass formed inside the glow. A tall figure stepped down onto the trail. It stood beside his hood, silent and still. Long arms hung too low, joints too narrow. A smooth head tilted toward him. Large black eyes held the cab like a lock. The figure raised one hand toward the glass. The gesture looked like invitation forward. Holland said it wanted him closer. He gripped the wheel until knuckles hurt. The hum pressed into his teeth. The orbs rotated in place, perfectly synchronized. The figure moved without footfall sound. It slid one step, then another, unreal smooth. It stopped at the passenger window line. The black eyes stayed on his face. Holland felt his tongue go numb. His radio hiss became a tight grid of clicks. The clicks matched a counting rhythm. His dash lights dimmed, then flared. His cabin temperature dropped again. He tried to speak and choked. He stayed seated and stared forward. The figure angled its head as if listening. The orbs pulsed, then pulsed again. His heartbeat matched their timing. The windshield briefly showed faint geometric seams. They looked etched into the air itself. Holland whispered a warning, but static swallowed it. Then his signal collapsed into patterned static. Unit 9 arrived at 3:04 to a running truck. Headlights stayed on and steady. The engine idled without changing tone. Doors stayed locked from the outside. The trail looked undisturbed around the tires. No footprints crossed the sand nearby. No brush was bent near the doors. The cab looked empty from every window angle. Their radios carried the same pulsing hiss. They circled the truck with flashlights and radios. Their beams found nothing under the chassis. The hood was cold to touch. The mirrors were frosted in thin lines. The windshield showed faint condensation shapes. The shapes looked like angular symbols. They shifted when lights moved across glass. They forced the lock and opened the door. The seat was empty and belts lay untouched. The cab air felt colder than outside. A faint smell of ozone clung inside. The radio speaker hissed in slow pulses. The pulse matched the earlier cadence. Unit 9 called Holland's name into the empty cab. The speaker answered with a metallic chirp. The chirp repeated on perfect intervals. It sounded like a reply without language. Their dash camera recorded, then froze. The frozen frame showed a faint orange smear. Then the camera resumed with nothing visible. Unit 9 searched outward along the trail edge. Their light swept brush and stones. The desert went too quiet again. Even the idling engine sounded distant. A faint orange shimmer hovered farther down trail. It blinked out without movement. Their radios crackled with clipped bursts. The bursts repeated on exact intervals. It felt like someone counting. The air pressed on their ears again. They found Holland behind a low berm. He lay face down and unmoving. His arms were tucked under his chest. His skin felt cold, yet he breathed steadily. No drag marks cut the sand behind him. No footprints led away from the truck. It looked like he fell straight down. His patrol cap sat beside his hand. It was perfectly clean of sand. His boots had no grit on them. They lifted him, and he jolted awake suddenly. His eyes stayed wide and glassy. His jaw moved with stiff precision. He spoke in a metallic voice for long seconds. The same phrase repeated with perfect timing. Each repetition carried less human rhythm. His breath did not match his words. It sounded like an instrument reading him. His head turned toward the horizon. He stared at nothing and trembled. Then his face softened and he blinked hard. His normal voice returned like a switch flipped. He asked why they moved his truck. He denied leaving the driver's seat at all. He insisted the last marker was 62. He remembered a low glow ahead. He remembered turning toward the passenger window. He remembered nothing after that. He started shivering and could not stop. Holland lost 35 minutes and refused every question. Unit 9 was ordered to stay quiet. The audio was stored off network. What spoke through Holland when the orbs hovered overhead? Comment your theory, then like and subscribe. Elena stepped outside her tent and saw a silent UFO hovering over Three Sisters. 3 white orbs circled it in a perfect triangle, like escort lights with no beam. Then an alien voice entered her mind and said, "Elena, slow and calm." Elena is a landscape photographer from Denver. She came for night skies and empty desert. The orbs looked bright, yet the ground stayed dark. No lights spilled onto sand or stone. A deep vibration rolled through her bones, and a voice inside her mind said her name. Elena fled to a ranger station. The ranger listened without surprise and showed her a thick folder called the Echo Files. It held decades of reports about lights, voices calling names, and missing time. Old university research from the 1990s was shut down without explanation. One visitor vanished after trying to communicate. A former ranger later died from sudden heart failure, leaving photos of tall figures with faces lost in darkness. Morning arrived with pale sun and a dry, restless wind. Elena returned to the campsite with the ranger and several helpers, moving slowly as if the ground itself could mislead them. The tent was down, not torn by weather but pressed and folded in a way that felt intentional, with stakes pulled cleanly from the soil and laid beside the fabric. Her gear had been shifted by inches, small enough to doubt her own memory, yet too consistent to ignore. The flashlight she kept in her pack was gone, and they found it standing upright on a boulder as if displayed, perfectly centered inside a ring of 12 stones set with measured spacing. No footprints surrounded the boulder, no scuffs, no drag marks, only smooth sand that looked untouched since yesterday. Elena tried to rationalize it as a prank, but nobody in that group laughed, and nobody offered a simple explanation. Elena checked her camera files with trembling hands. Every image she remembered taking of the orbs was missing, replaced by frames of empty sky that matched the same angles and settings, like the scene had been edited after the shutter clicked. One final photo remained, and she knew she did not take it. It showed a tall figure near the Three Sisters rocks, too straight and too still, with proportions subtly wrong. Shoulders narrow yet towering, limbs too long in the dim. Where a face should be, there was only a clean patch of darkness, not shadow, more like an absence that refused detail. The ranger studied it in silence, then said it matched an older case photo kept in the Echo Files, taken years ago by a former ranger who later died after similar encounters. As they packed up, Elena heard her name again, faint and distant. carried on no wind she could feel. She did not tell anyone. The others kept their eyes low on the trail, and the desert around them felt charged, as if waiting for a single upward glance. The escalation came in daylight, which made it harder to dismiss and easier to fear. Reports poured in from observation point, and Elena returned with the ranger to meet a loose cluster of locals who claimed they had seen the lights under a clear blue sky. From the overlook, the desert spread wide and bright, yet the air above the rock formations looked subtly distorted, like heat shimmer without heat. Then 3 white orbs appeared, clean and featureless, hanging motionless for a heartbeat before sliding into a pattern that felt deliberate. They moved in arcs that resembled star charts, turning at sharp angles with perfect timing, as if tracing constellations no human had named. People pointed and argued in whispers, yet none of them stepped forward. When the orbs shifted closer, the ground beneath them stayed unlit, as if the brightness existed only for eyes, not for the world. Elena felt the change before anyone else noticed. Sound dulled, her breath seemed far away, and the edges of the landscape widened as if she was seeing through a lens with the wrong focal length. In her mind, a tall presence took shape, more than 2 meters, calm and unmoving, its skin threaded with organic circuit-like patterns that pulsed faintly in a rhythm she could not count. It did not speak aloud. It pressed meaning directly into her thoughts, telling her that photography captured only a small truth, and that the larger truth required transformation. For a moment, Elena saw layers of reality peel back, time folding and sliding sideways, distance behaving like a suggestion instead of a rule. She tried to hold on to names, to her own history, to the feeling of her hands, and then the world snapped back with people staring at her as if she had been gone. Her phone clock and wristwatch no longer matched, separated by several hours, and when she checked her messages, she found a new text from an unknown number. It told her to return alone tonight to 3 sisters, promising to show her what she was ready to see. The ranger warned her about missing time and mimic voices, but Elena listened and still made her choice. Night returned with a clean, starless darkness. Elena drove back alone to 3 sisters. Headlights kept low, eyes fixed on the road line. She parked far from the rocks and walked the last stretch on foot. The desert felt staged, too still, as if wind had been told to stop. She carried her camera, spare cards, a small recorder, and a few markers to anchor her mind. She did not bring a flashlight. She rebuilt the circle with the 12 stones, placing each one where she remembered it. The flashlight stood upright again on the boulder, though she could not explain how it returned. Elena set her camera on a tripod aimed at the open sky above the rock spires, then placed a second device on the ground facing the circle. She whispered her own name once to test the air. The sound fell flat, absorbed as if the desert refused echoes. The orbs arrived without travel. One moment the sky was empty. The next moment 3 white spheres hung above the rocks. They held their triangle with strict precision, rotating slowly as a single unit. The light looked bright enough to burn, yet it did not touch sand or stone. Elena felt the familiar vibration build in her bones, deeper than fear, deeper than sound. She kept her chin level, refusing the instinct to tilt upward too far. A 4th presence made itself known, not as a shape at first, but as pressure. Elena sensed a tall figure just beyond her direct sight, positioned where her camera aimed, meaning pushed into her thoughts, calm and weighty, asking her to step into the circle. Elena understood then that the warning was not about the sky itself. It was about attention, about the direction of the mind. She realized the orbs were not the visitors. They were the escorts, the markers, the instruments that guided focus. Elena stepped forward. The moment her boots crossed the stone ring, the world thickened. Time lost its clean order. The desert around her became layered, like multiple versions occupying the same space. The tall figure resolved in her inner vision, over 2 meters, skin threaded with organic circuit patterns that pulsed softly. It did not speak with words. It showed her a concept of watching that felt endless, beings outside time, observing a world that changes too fast to hold. Loneliness flowed from it, not human, but unmistakable. Elena felt herself becoming a surface they could touch without breaking. 3 hours passed on her devices. Inside her mind, it felt like weeks. She saw static as a language, noise as a carrier, light as a grammar. She learned to look without feeding the wrong kind of observation, to measure reality without collapsing it. When the pressure released, Elena found herself standing outside the circle with her camera still recording. The orbs were gone. The air was normal again, yet she could now see faint currents in the darkness, lines of energy threading through the desert. After that week, Elena was seen less and less. Some say she moved closer to the desert. Some say she never left Three Sisters again. The echo files kept growing, with new pages added quietly. If you think you know what took Elena, write your theory in the comments. Like and subscribe for the next report.
Dean opened Unit 23 and found the odometer reading 0 miles. The dashcam file showed 47 seconds of white screen and a deep well echo. Dispatch swore he vanished for 15 minutes while he was still standing there. Dean Matthews is 38. He has patrolled the border 11 years. He trusted maps and procedure. He did not trust ghosts or aliens. Then October 3rd, 2024 arrived. Route 87 cuts through West Texas desert. Night there feels endless. Dean patrolled with a partner. Near midnight, a low hum rose southward. It pulsed in steady beats, then stopped. At 2:14 a.m., Dean found Unit 23 on the shoulder. The emergency lights pulsed in steady beats. The driver door stood open into dry wind. The cab was empty and too quiet. The engine block still felt warm. The odometer perfectly clean. Dean stared at the digits, then checked again. It was still 0, with no scratches. He checked the dash for dust lines. Everything looked reset, not replaced. The fuel gauge sat at half, like normal. The seatbelt hung straight and untouched. The steering wheel felt cool, not human warm. Dean searched the dirt near the door. No boot prints circled the cab. No drag marks crossed the sand. No scuffle marks cut the gravel. The road shoulder looked undisturbed. Even pebbles sat in neat clusters. His radio showed no bars at all. His phone showed no service either. The hum rose from the south again. It pulsed 3 times, then died. Dean opened the glove box and found the dash camera. He carried it to the patrol laptop. The file played with a clean timestamp. 2 officers stopped for strange road lights. One stepped out and faced the darkness. The other opened the door to follow. Then the image turned pure white for 47 seconds. No motion lines, no glare, just white. The audio held only a deep echo. It repeated like a well. Slow and hollow. The echo never matched their footsteps. When the picture returned, both were gone. The open door remained on screen. The emergency lights still flashed outside. The timestamp jumped forward without warning. Logs showed 6 missing minutes around that gap. Dean called dispatch and reported every detail. Dispatch said Dean vanished for 15 minutes. Dean checked his own watch and doubted it. He felt only 10 minutes pass, at most. Dean was forced onto leave after the roadside find. A plain envelope reached his home. No return address. Inside were copied reports and clipped photos. 17 cases across 8 years. Vehicles reset to impossible data. Radios dead, GPS wrong, and missing time. Some survivors carried geometric marks. Most described the same low hum. Many described lights moving against physics. A few described tall, thin beams near the lights. Large heads appeared in every account. Dean tried to dismiss it as rumor, yet Unit 23 matched the pages too well. 3 weeks later, the pattern found Dean again. He worked a different sector that night. His radio died mid-sentence. His GPS reset to unfamiliar coordinates. The hum returned and pressed into his teeth. 3 lights appeared off the roadway, holding formation. Dean counted seconds to stay anchored. His watch showed 4 minutes of tracking. His body felt less than 1 minute. Then the lights vanished at impossible speed. Dean stopped waiting for permission after that. He began investigating alone. He built a monitoring post at mile marker 43. He used hardened gear, backup power, and paper logs. On November 17th, intensity spiked hard. 7 lights formed a ring around his position. Radios failed at once, then stayed dead. The echo hid inside his head, not ears. 1 light dropped 20 feet away. A thin figure stood inside the glow. upright and too tall. A question pressed into his mind. Do you understand? Dean could not answer fast enough. Then he lost 15 minutes of real time. Tests later found rare earths in his blood. Unit 23 never returned. The missing list grew anyway. 37 became 45, then the numbers stopped being shared aloud. Dean kept their last location pinned on a paper map, a small X that never moved. He stopped telling himself it was accidents and errors. Something took people off Route 87, and it did it on purpose. Dean went back to Route 87 alone and stayed there. He drove the same loop at the same hours, week after week, as if routine could force a pattern to show itself. He logged everything with paper and mechanical tools, not just electronics. He wrote down each hum pulse, each radio blackout, each GPS reset, each moment his watch disagreed with the trot clock. He started leaving markers on the shoulder, then checking them later. Not once did he find a normal explanation that fit all the data. Then the UFO stopped hiding. One night the hum rose and the air went thick, and a craft appeared over the roadway like it had been there all along. It was huge, wider than the highway, a dark shape with no visible seams. It hovered without wind wash, without engine sound, without heat shimmer. Lights ran along its underside in clean geometric lines, not blinking like aircraft, but sliding like a signal. Dean watched it through the windshield, hands locked on the wheel, and the odometer flashed 0 miles again for 2 seconds before returning. On another night, the craft came lower, and Dean saw movement inside the light, not just glare. A tall alien figure stood within the glow beside his truck, human-shaped but too thin, head too large, eyes too wide to belong to any person. It did not walk in from the desert. It was simply there when the light arrived. Dean heard a voice in his mind, calm and precise, asking the same question from his earlier encounter. Do you understand? His mouth went dry. He tried to speak out loud and his radio crackled with the words instead, as if his thoughts were being routed through the speaker. The encounters multiplied. 3 escort lights would sweep ahead of his patrol route, then stop and hold formation, guiding him toward a spot on the shoulder. When Dean slowed, the UFO would appear above, and the desert would turn silent. He saw 2 more alien figures beside the road, standing in a line like survey posts. He forced himself to look long enough to describe them, then look away long enough to stay functional. Each time, time slipped. His watch would jump ahead, his body would feel only seconds. After one blackout, he found a fresh geometric mark on his forearm, sharp-edged and pale, like a pattern pressed under the skin. His boots carried fine white dust that did not match any local soil. Dean realized the missing minutes were not empty. They were filled with contact he could not fully remember. The dash cam whiteout was not glare. It was a controlled screen, a deliberate cut. The odometer 0 was not a glitch. It was a reset to baseline before they ran the next test. Unit 23 remains unsolved. The desert keeps its secrets, and Route 87 keeps its silence. Dean still patrols at night, waiting for the next hum pulse and the next impossible reset. Share your theory below, then hit like and subscribe so you do not miss the next report.
Forget everything you know about gravity and time. Deep beneath Kentucky's Mammoth Cave lies a permanent, fundamental tear in the fabric of space-time. SCP-1351, the Mobius Cave. This is where reality unravels. Today, we break down the Foundation's sealed files to explore the forbidden events and terrifying scientific hypotheses suggesting this cave is not mere geology, but a cosmic warning. To understand the horror of SCP-1351, you must first understand the context. The SCP Foundation operates on a simple mandate: secure, contain, protect. Their enemy is the anomalous, the things that violate consensus reality. SCP-1351 is classified as Euclid. This means its behavior is unpredictable, its capabilities are immense, and its containment requires constant vigilance. Its location is ironic, hidden in plain sight within the Mammoth Cave National Park. While thousands of tourists explore the safe, beautiful caverns, only a few hundred meters away, under the guise of the SEHER Bat Preserve, lies the true horror. Discovered in 1995 by speleologists mapping potential connections to the main park system, initial expeditions immediately yielded results that shattered all known geological and physical models. The entrance itself is the first clue. A strange, almost perfectly circular hole in the ceiling of an underground chamber, 125 meters below the surface, a path that demands a descent upward to begin. The three expedition teams between 1995 and 2002 established one undeniable truth. The warp tunnels within 1351 operate entirely outside Newtonian physics. It's reported that the gravity you experience is entirely dependent on the angle of the floor, and the floor itself can twist and loop, reassuming positions parallel to its original location, a geometric nightmare that creates its own internal gravitational field. Inside 1351, time moves on its own terms. A researcher entering for what they perceive as 20 minutes may emerge to find that 3 hours have passed in the outside world. This temporal distortion is not linear. It is random, volatile, and inexplicable. The combination of unpredictable gravity, self-looping geometry, and shattered time defines 1351, transforming a mere cave into a weapon of abstract terror. How does the Foundation contain such a fundamental break in reality? With a perimeter fence, unauthorized vehicle warnings, and a security team dressed as park rangers and civilian speleologists, a thin veil of normalcy draped over the edge of the abyss. This is the stage. Now let's look at the events the Foundation keeps deliberately classified. The Foundation's top minds have developed three primary, terrifying hypotheses to explain the geometry and power of the Mobius cave. These are not just scientific theories, they are philosophical nightmares. Hypothesis Alpha: the Mobius strip and the wormhole torsion is the simplest, most elegant, and arguably the most frightening explanation. The Mobius cave is the embodiment of a mathematical construct made real. A Mobius strip is a two-dimensional object that, when twisted, becomes one-sided. In the case of 1351, this is happening in 3 dimensions. The cave is a permanent, self-looping wormhole. The tunnels aren't physically linked, they are topologically connected. When you enter, you are traveling along a single continuous surface that lacks a defined inside or outside, up or down. The shifting gravity is merely the effect of the traveler constantly switching which side of the dimensional surface they are occupying. This implies that the cave is a flaw in reality itself, a geological impossibility that has been made physically manifest. The victims like Lasca and Dunbar were not killed by a creature or a trap, but by the pure, unyielding logic of a flawed mathematical equation that their 3-dimensional bodies could not solve. It suggests that the laws of physics we hold so dear are merely superficial rules that can be broken by extreme geometry. Hypothesis Beta, the 4D extraterrestrial transit station, introduces a more chilling cosmic element. What if the cave isn't naturally occurring? What if it's the remnant of something artificial? This theory proposes that SCP-1351 is not a cave, but the 3-dimensional shadow of a structure existing in the 4th spatial dimension, a dimension we can only perceive as constantly shifting geometry. The inexplicable, unpredictable gravity changes are not errors in the cave, but the rules of the 4th dimension being imposed upon our reality. The weight shifts, the twists, the loops, these are merely the up, down, and sideways of a 4-dimensional object that is constantly moving relative to our 3-dimensional plane. This leads directly to the idea of the cave as an extraterrestrial transit station. If an advanced alien civilization could perceive and manipulate the 4th dimension, they could use 1351 as a natural, pre-existing gateway, a cosmic subway stop, allowing for instantaneous travel across unimaginable distances. The temporal anomalies would be a byproduct of their faster-than-light travel methods leaking into our timeline. The cave isn't a destination, it's the loading ramp for interstellar voyages. The final hypothesis Gamma, the stain and the alien contamination most insidious theory, casts 1351 as a scar on reality. This hypothesis suggests that a massive dimension-hopping entity or a cosmic vessel once passed through this exact point in Kentucky. The sheer energy or biological force required to breach our reality left an energetic stain, a permanent zone of contamination. The physical warping, the flattening of D8334, and the time dilation are all residual effects, like radiation sickness of the universe. The entity is long gone, but its passing has permanently thinned the barrier between our world and the voids it traverses. The Moebius Cave is simply the place where the wound never healed, proving that the borders of our reality are far more fragile than we dare to admit. To fully grasp the unique terror of SCP-1351, we must place it next to one of the most psychologically devastating spatial anomalies in Foundation history, SCP-3001, the Red Reality. Comparing these two nightmares illuminates the different ways reality can break. SCP-1351 is a geometric nightmare, a space-time torsion. It twists physical rock into a mathematically impossible loop. The horror is that the material world is present, but the rules of engagement are wrong. Conversely, SCP-3001 is a hole in everything, an extra-dimensional void utterly devoid of light and gravity. The horror of 3001 is the absence of everything. In 1351, the horror is physical and immediate. Death comes from the mechanical violence of space-time, where victims are crushed and geometrically reduced. It is the ultimate body horror. In 3001, the horror is psychological and protracted. Dr. Anderson was suspended in an agonizing limbo of isolation, facing existential decay. It is the ultimate psychological horror. The classification irony persists. SCP-3001 is safe because its void is static and predictable. SCP-1351 remains Euclid because its internal mechanics, the gravity shifts and random geometry, are volatile, unpredictable, and potentially contagious. Both manipulate time, but 1351 causes chaotic shifts, 20 minutes in, hours later out, inflicting the trauma of lost continuity. 3001 causes extreme, consistent dilation, minutes feel like years, inflicting the trauma of suffering's endless extension. We return to the Moebius Cave. Whether it's a natural wormhole or an alien dock, its implications are profound. The fragility of our reality. SCP-1351 proves that our stable, three-dimensional world can be shattered by a single geometric twist, a cosmic ripple. The ultimate horror is the fate of D-8334, the paper person. This cave demonstrates the potential for dimensional collapse, the annihilation of a human being from 3 dimensions to 2. This permanent open wound, this scar on space-time, is not healing. The Foundation fights a geological anomaly that behaves like a sentient mathematical construct, daring scientists to find the error in its logic. The Moebius Cave is a cosmic riddle that asks, is our reality the intended design, or merely a temporary structure waiting to be folded, twisted, and collapsed by the true, abstract geometry of the universe? The Foundation guards the entrance, but they cannot guard the idea. The idea that time can betray you, and that the ground beneath your feet could be a single, continuous, terrifying surface leading nowhere you recognize. What do you think is hiding inside the Moebius Cave? Is it an alien dock, or a wound that will eventually bleed into our world? Let us know your theories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more explorations into the classified files of the SCP Foundation. Until next time, stay safe. I fear for my kids and everybody else's kids. Jim Sparks did not say that after a nightmare. He said it after decades of being taken from his bed, paralyzed on a freezing table, and used like genetic livestock by something that does not see us as people. Tonight, we are not asking if alien abductions are real. We are asking a harder question. What if the most terrifying part is that they see themselves as the caretakers, and we are the failing herd? Jim Sparks survived decades of this. Most abductees talk about fragments, flashes of light, missing time, pieces of memory that feel like dreams. Jim was different. He claimed to be 95% consciously aware during his encounters. For him, the abductions were not hazy nightmares he could dismiss afterward. They were events he was forced to live through, awake, trapped again and again. That awareness was not a gift, it was a curse. He began like anyone else, a regular guy from a regular town, worrying about bills, work, and the future. But at night, when the world went quiet and soft, another reality opened around him. It always began with the cold. He felt the entities before he saw them, a chill that did not stop at the skin but slid straight into the bones. It was not a draft or the bite of winter air. It was a deep, invasive cold that made his skeleton feel hollow and his blood thick, as if his body was being prepared for something he did not want to understand. Then the Greys appeared. Jim never described them like the cartoon images on t-shirts. They were not goofy little green men. They were small and slender, but disturbingly fragile, like porcelain figures that should shatter with one touch, except they did not. They could restrain a grown man without effort. Their arms were thin, and their long fingers moved with surgical precision, every gesture controlled and efficient. They did not walk, they glided. Every movement was frictionless and stripped of human rhythm, no sway of the shoulders, no shift of weight, no wasted motion. They slid across the room as if the floor was optional and gravity was only a suggestion. Watching them felt like watching an animation that did not match the physics of the rest of the world. Your eyes could follow it, but your brain kept rejecting it. For Jim, leaving his home felt like disintegration. His body did not hurt, it simply stopped feeling like a body. His nerves went silent, as if someone had thrown a hidden switch. 1 second, there was a bedroom, night air, and the distant sound of the highway. The next second, nothing felt familiar. The house, the neighborhood, even the idea of home turned thin and false, peeling away like a stage backdrop. The final surge before arrival was worse than physical pain. He felt as if something was scooping up his sense of self and stretching it across an invisible distance, thinning it out until it almost snapped. In that instant, he understood that whatever held him had total control. For these beings, time and space were not barriers. They were materials. Jim would awaken on the table. The cold there was different, predatory. It did not just make him shiver. It seemed to drain heat out of his organs, as if the room itself was feeding on his warmth. His body felt like an object someone had left in a freezer and forgotten. The room around him was built for dread. The walls were smooth and seamless, glowing softly with no visible light source. No lamps, no panels, no shadows. Perspective never felt stable, as if the space shifted just outside his line of sight. There were no corners, no familiar edges his mind could grab onto. It felt less like a room and more like the inside of an idea. Waiting in that impossible chamber were those he would come to call the keepers. Not just aliens. Keepers, as if humanity were livestock and they were the handlers. Their skin was pale and nearly translucent, stretched tight over thin bird-like bones. They looked fragile, but when they touched him, their grip was absolute. They were walking contradictions, frail yet overpowering, small yet dominating, silent yet deafening inside his mind. And then there were their eyes. They were not just big and black. They were polished voids, wet and glassy, reflecting warped versions of the room and of Jim himself. Looking into them was not like meeting a gaze. It was like staring down a bottomless shaft. There was no recognition, no sympathy, no emotion of any kind that he could relate to anything human. They were alive, but they felt like tools. The air shook with a low subsonic vibration, the pulse of the craft. It was not loud, but Jim felt it in his chest, his stomach, along his spine. It made his insides buzz as if the sound had been tuned to him. He lay pinned between the frozen table and the indifferent machinery above, caught in a geometry that did not care whether he lived or died. The procedures were clinical and efficient, soaked in a kind of terror that went beyond pain. The scanning did not feel like a medical test. It felt like a break-in. Jim felt an intelligence pushing through him, rifling through his thoughts, memories, fears, and secrets the way someone might sort through files on a stolen hard drive. His mind did not feel like his own. Instruments appeared around him, thin needle-like devices glowing with a faint, unsettling light. They were not hanging from arms or cables. They simply appeared, as if wanting them there was enough. Jim stayed conscious as the keepers removed what he believed was his most fundamental biological material. His reproductive capacity, his genetic future, reduced to samples taken with calm precision. There was no anger in their movements, no hatred, no thrill. That was the worst part. This was not torture. Torture requires emotion, rage, cruelty, or the desire to dominate. What they did to him did not need any of that. It was colder than hate. It was farming. His body was not being punished. It was being used, treated as a resource, a tank of raw material that a program could tap again and again as long as the unit stayed alive and functional. Whether he screamed, begged, or prayed did not matter. His reactions meant nothing. In that realization, Jim's life split in two. He was no longer just a man on Earth. He was a genetic asset, a slave. The last phase of each encounter was what he called the steering procedure, a telepathic attack that made the physical violations feel almost simple. When one of the Greys fixed its eyes on him, the room fell away. No walls, no table, no ship, only pressure, a brutal expansion behind his temples, as if invisible hands were pushing his skull outward from the inside. Information did not drift into his mind, it slammed in. Jim described it as a high-speed torrent, a flood of images, symbols, emotions, and concepts forced into his awareness all at once. There was no time to filter, no option to look away. His own thoughts were pushed to the edges to make room. In those flashes, he saw Earth dying. He saw skies thick with toxins, oceans drained of life, forests reduced to black stumps. He saw cities failing under their own weight, not because of dramatic alien attacks, but because of neglect, greed, and decay. Humanity was not being conquered on a battlefield. It was wearing itself out. He also saw them, hybrids, beings that looked almost human, but not quite. Children with pale skin, enormous dark eyes, and unnaturally calm faces. Too quiet, too still. Riding buses, walking through crowds, sitting in classrooms, watching. Through it all, he felt one message pressed into his mind, not spoken, but etched there with absolute certainty. Your species is unfit. Your environment is now our primary concern. Later, when he tried to put it into simple human terms, Jim said that it was a high-speed torrent, a deluge of symbols and images, and that they did not ask him to understand. They forced him to know that humanity was unfit and that the planet had become their main concern. To him, that was the final horror. The beings who froze his body, scraped his genetics, and tore through his mind did not see themselves as invaders or monsters. They saw themselves as custodians, caretakers of a failing world, and we were the species they intended to manage. After years of Jim's clear, consistent testimony, the usual scientific explanations start to feel less like answers and more like defense mechanisms. Skeptics often reach first for sleep paralysis. Psychologist Susan Clancy and others say abductions come from a REM glitch. The brain wakes up, the body stays frozen, you sense a presence, feel a weight on your chest, panic, and in a culture full of UFOs, your mind fills the gap with grays and ships. It is tidy and comforting. But sleep paralysis is brief and chaotic. Jim's encounters were structured, repeated over decades, with detailed ship layouts, roles, and procedures. Calling that a simple brain spasm feels more like emotional protection than serious science. The God helmet offers another answer. Dr. Death Michael Persinger showed that magnetic stimulation of the temporal lobes can create a feeling of a presence. Yet to use this as a full explanation, you must believe thousands of unrelated people are somehow generating almost the same story. The same grays, rooms, harvesting, hybrids. The question is not whether Jim Sparks is crazy. The question is much worse. When the paralysis hits you one night, when the air trembles, when the room starts to bend and your body refuses to move, will you tell yourself it was just a dream, or will you realize you were never alone in that room at all? If you have ever felt that presence at the edge of your bed, if you have ever woken up frozen with a weight on your chest, I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me honestly, was it sleep paralysis, psychology, or something else watching you in the dark? If this story unsettled you, make sure you like this video so it reaches more people, subscribe and turn on the bell so you do not miss the next case, and share it with someone who always says, "I do not believe in aliens," and see if they still sleep as well tonight. Because if Jim Sparks is telling the truth, this is not just his story. It might be a warning meant for you. Listen, the wind is still, the dogs are restless, your cattle are uneasy. If you don't check now, it might be too late. On a cold, silent morning, a rancher found one of his cows lying alone in the back field. At first glance, it seemed routine, but the absence of tracks, disturbed soil, or nervous herd told another story. The air was heavy, the silence hollow, and a faint metallic smell lingered. At a glance, the cow appears mostly intact. No huge chunks are missing, no shredded flesh, no signs of a predator. But the head tells a different story. The jawline stripped of flesh in a neat, curved band, one eye socket perfectly empty, the ear gone as if removed with a single, precise motion. The openings are smooth, almost polished. He searches for blood. A cow carries gallons of it. Predators kill messily. Bullets or gut wounds leave puddles. Here there is none. No stains, no seepage, the hide dry, the exposed tissue strangely bloodless, emptied rather than opened. A veterinarian arrives. He has seen coyotes tear livestock, diseased waste animals, and bodies left in the sun. This is different. The cuts are smooth, the work of an instrument or an intelligence beyond human skill. Certain organs are gone, removed rather than torn. Capillaries look drained. Fractures in the legs and ribs suggest impact injuries, not simple collapse. And yet, the ground is flat. No sign of struggle, no evidence that anything could have moved the animal. If it was moved, how? A cow doesn't float, it doesn't teleport. And still, the body, the wounds, the empty space whisper the same impossible suggestion. It was taken, worked on, and returned, altered by some unseen hand. Word spreads quickly in the rural community. Another dead cow might have been ignored, but this one is different. The sheriff's department sends a deputy, the vet files his report, and soon an independent investigator arrives, someone who has spent years chasing patterns most would rather ignore. He has seen this scene before: bloodless carcasses, surgical cuts, empty ground. He isn't here to dismiss it. The three men walk the field. The deputy searches for human evidence: cigarette butts, footprints, tire tracks. He finds nothing. The vet looks for natural causes: disease, injury, and predators. The body yields no answers. The investigator searches for repetition, signature, the invisible fingerprints of an intelligence that leaves no trace. He asks questions that make the others uneasy: strange lights in the sky, humming noises at night, animals acting strangely. Stories emerge. The rancher admits the dogs were restless the night before, pacing and whining for no reason. A neighbor says she awoke at 2 a.m. to a soft white glow in her bedroom. Pulling back the curtain, she saw a round, silent light hovering over the fields. After a minute, it dimmed and vanished. Predators leave ragged wounds and tracks, not surgical precision or total bloodlessness. Humans, even the most careful, leave evidence: footprints, tire marks, but none exist here. This case matches others in different counties, states, and years. To blame humans requires believing in a secret operation with perfect stealth, advanced tools, and no explainable motive. Natural explanations fail. Fractures suggest a fall. Blood is completely absent, even when soil is tested. Certain organs are consistently missing and cuts are precise. Ranchers swear the animals were healthy hours before. Each normal explanation covers only one detail and collapses against the others. As night falls, the three men sense the same invisible wall. Something happened here that defies conventional reasoning. No tracks, no blood, only fleeting lights and eerie stillness. An intelligence acting with precision and disappearing without a trace. The investigator notes anomalies: flattened grass, disturbed soil, and quiet that feels alive. The event seems sudden, surgical, and observed from afar. The pattern repeats across time and distance, consistent and deliberate. It points not to nature, not to humans, but to something else entirely, something precise, deliberate, untraceable. By the night's end, reports are filed, notes added, but the mystery remains. The signature of the act, the precision, the lack of evidence, the recurring pattern, resists explanation. Only one conclusion seems to fit. An intelligence moves silently, strikes surgically, and vanishes, leaving the impossible for the world to puzzle over. At some point, usually when the recorder is off or the camera isn't rolling, someone finally says what nobody wants to admit. What if the animal wasn't killed here at all? What if it was taken? The idea feels absurd, especially in daylight, in front of adults with jobs and reputations. Yet the facts line up: broken bones like a fall, a bloodless body, surgical cuts, untouched ground. It makes the most physical sense, even if the least emotional sense. In the deep hours of the night, a silent light descends over the field. The cow is lifted, not dragged into the air. No marks, no struggle, no tracks. It is brought inside something, call it a craft, a machine, a lab, that doesn't care about our words for it. Inside, there is no ritual, no candles, no chants. There is a procedure: bright, harsh light, smooth, cold surfaces, instruments that cut tissue without tearing, remove organs without splashing, and extract blood completely. The animal is not a victim in a horror story. It is a specimen, a data point, a sample. When the procedure is finished, the body is returned. Not placed gently, but dropped from a height, enough to fracture bones, not enough to scatter the carcass. Whatever life remained, if any, is gone. By sunrise, all that's left is a circle of untouched earth with a dead, altered animal at its center. The only signs of anything unnatural are the body itself and the rare stories of people who admit seeing something strange in the sky. If this had happened once, it could be dismissed as an anomaly, but it hasn't. Investigators who track these cases maintain maps most people never see, pinboards and databases filled with mutilations from ranches across the country and beyond. Different owners, breeds, and landscapes, yet the same story. Bloodless carcasses, precise cuts, missing eyes and organs, no tracks. Years apart, states apart, yet eerily alike. The pattern doesn't look random, it looks systematic, like a program running quietly in the background of rural life, ignored by those unwilling to consider that the operating system might not be entirely human. Eventually, the mutilated cow is hauled away. The rancher still has to feed the rest of his herd. Bills still come. The world doesn't stop just because something impossible happened in a field. The sheriff files it as unexplained. The vet hides behind careful wording. The investigator adds one more pin to his map and drives off, knowing this exact scene has played out before, in another county, another year. Officially, nothing has been proven. Unofficially, nothing has been disproven either. But for the people who stood over that body, it never really ends. The rancher can't walk that patch of ground without seeing the clean circle of dirt and that empty socket where an eye should be. The neighbor who saw the hovering light now double-checks the sky before she closes her curtains. The investigator stares at his map at night and realizes the pattern doesn't look random anymore. Do you watch your herd closely at night? Comment below if you've ever seen something unexplainable. From Argentina to New Mexico to Oregon, the mutilations spread with chilling consistency. Hollowed bodies, precise excisions, untouched landscapes. The same intelligence, the same precision, the same eerie signature appeared again and again. Something was studying Earth, and we could only wonder why. Reports of livestock mutilations have appeared across the globe, from Argentina to New Mexico. Animals found drained of blood, organs missing, and bodies untouched by scavengers. Each case shared the same eerie precision, leaving no explanation that fit earthly predators. In 2024, Oregon became the epicenter of this unexplained phenomenon. Ranchers discovered herds hollowed and dissected with perfect accuracy, pastures left undisturbed. Witnesses described glowing orange spheres rising silently from the ground, splitting in two, and vanishing within seconds. Shadowy forms were seen moving near the livestock, then disappearing as if the night itself swallowed them. The surge drew ufologists, scientists, and authorities, all captivated by a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Intelligence, stealth, and technology beyond human understanding were at work. The question remained, who or what was behind these operations, and why was Oregon the stage for this unfolding mystery? In the darkness, the creatures emerged, tall and spindly, their skin a pale, metallic gray that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Oversized, amber-like eyes glowed with an unearthly intelligence, and their long, jointed limbs moved with a sinuous, almost liquid grace. They glided across the field silently, approaching the unsuspecting livestock with precision that defied natural explanation. Each animal froze, locked in place by an invisible field that rippled softly through the air, muscles rigid yet perfectly relaxed, eyes wide but calm. Not a single hoof shuffled, not a blade of grass bent under their passage. From their elongated arms, intricate tools extended, devices that seemed almost alive, capable of merging seamlessly with the veins and arteries of the immobilized animals. The blood was drawn methodically, siphoned from the body with a precision that left not a trace. No ruptured vessels, no coagulated residue, not even a single stray cell. The creatures worked quickly and silently, harvesting the life force with a mechanical rhythm, as though each extraction followed a pre-programmed protocol. Surrounding tissues remained untouched, organs unscathed, the animals' forms eerily intact, apart from the emptiness within. Once the harvest was complete, the instruments retracted as effortlessly as they appeared. The creatures lingered for a moment, surveying the still, silent field, then melted back into the shadows, their elongated forms vanishing between the hills. The livestock lay exactly where they had been taken, hollowed and unspoiled, an uncanny testament to the precision of the operation. The fields were left in perfect calm, devoid of footprints or drag marks, as if the event had been nothing more than a whisper in the night. Silence and emptiness remained, the only evidence of beings whose technology and intent far exceeded anything of this world. The creatures crouched beside their victims, their elongated limbs bending in impossible angles. Pale gray skin stretched taut over thin, sinewy bodies, while their large amber eyes scanned the animal with clinical focus. One limb extended, revealing a tool that gleamed faintly, almost organic in design. It pressed gently against the surface of the skin, peeling it back like the cover of a book, exposing the soft tissue beneath. Their selections were meticulous. Eyes, ears, lips, and tongue were removed with an eerie consistency, every cut clean and precise, as if guided by an invisible map. Reproductive organs disappeared entirely, excised without damaging surrounding tissues. The process suggested purpose beyond simple predation, biological sampling perhaps for genetic study, or examination of reproductive and soft tissue structures unknown to human science. Each movement was deliberate, economical, and silent. The animals remained immobilized, their bodies perfectly still as the aliens harvested what they needed. The most disturbing aspect was the drilling and suction method. A tiny circular opening appeared in the upper jaw, extending directly into the brain and ocular cavity. The creature's instruments drew the tissues through with impossibly delicate precision. The eyes and brain matter vanished into a slender tube that seemed to absorb without tearing. Surrounding structures were untouched. The technique implied a level of bioengineering and tool design far beyond human capability. Each procedure was executed quickly, without error, leaving the animal intact except for the removed organs. A clean surgical extraction performed as though the animal were simply a living specimen in a laboratory. Every detail suggested preparation, study, and purpose. The creatures did not act randomly. They moved like researchers conducting repeated experiments, recording data through each removal. Precision was paramount, stealth essential. Their actions left no traditional trace of violence, yet the results were unmistakable. The animals were altered, hollowed, and cataloged in a way that defied any earthly explanation. After the extraction, the creatures engaged in their final stage, relocation and environmental control. Under the cover of night, they lifted the animals with silent strength, returning them to the exact locations from which they had been taken. The fields remained pristine. No drag marks, no footprints, no evidence of transportation betrayed the scene. Their observation of the terrain extended over weeks or months, as hovering orbs and silent crafts scouted the area, selecting the next target with care and precision. Even more unsettling was the repulsion effect left behind. Carcasses remained untouched by scavengers, predators, or insects for weeks, sometimes months. Wolves, coyotes, vultures, and even smaller insects avoided the bodies entirely. Some fields showed no disturbance at all, as if the very life around the corpse recoiled. The aliens appeared to exert a subtle, unseen control, whether through chemical treatment, electromagnetic influence, or energy fields that made the corpses biologically hazardous or repellent. These measures reinforced both stealth and danger. Any human or animal interference was prevented, preserving the integrity of the samples and ensuring no contamination. The combination of perfect placement, environmental manipulation, and biological isolation turned each site into a sealed laboratory of their design. The creatures moved with calculated intelligence, leaving behind landscapes that were unnervingly silent, meticulously arranged, and utterly alien. The evidence left in the wake of these events forms an undeniable pattern. Blood drained completely from the animals, precise surgical excisions removed eyes, ears, lips, tongues, and reproductive organs, and the scenes were manipulated with such perfection that not a footprint or drag mark betrayed the operation. Each method points to intelligence and technology far beyond any earthly predator, confirming that these acts could not have been carried out by natural forces. Human hands might replicate some aspects in theory, yet the speed, accuracy, and flawless execution suggest a presence entirely alien. The motives behind such operations remain speculative but chilling. The harvesting of biological material hints at systematic experimentation, an ongoing study of Earth's living organisms. Genetic analysis, reproductive sampling, or unknown physiological research may be the purpose, yet the full scope of intent remains hidden. Some have even proposed theological interpretations: fallen angels, demonic entities, or extraterrestrial beings enacting designs beyond human understanding. The deliberate, methodical nature of the acts leaves no room for randomness. Every movement is calculated, every sample collected with intent. A single haunting question persists. Why are these occurrences concentrated almost exclusively in the United States, leaving the rest of the world untouched? The selective geography adds another layer of mystery, suggesting observation, planning, and a purpose linked to location. For those who witness or investigate these events, the implications are profound. Humanity may be observing an extraterrestrial program unfolding in plain sight, a silent experiment against which we are powerless to intervene. Each hollowed carcass and untouched pasture becomes a call to examine the unknown, to investigate beyond the confines of our planet, and to confront the unsettling reality that we are not alone and perhaps have never been. If this mystery captivates you, leave a comment with your theories and experiences. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the unexplained and the extraterrestrial. In the quiet, rural corners of America, an untold horror unfolds under the veil of night. It's a recurring nightmare that has haunted farmers for over 50 years, a mystery where the victims are livestock and the perpetrator defies human logic. This is not the work of wolves or coyotes. This is calculated, precise, and utterly bloodless. They call them cattle mutilations. For decades, investigators have been chasing ghosts, yet the evidence points increasingly toward a non-terrestrial solution. Tonight, we peel back the layers of this gruesome enigma, from the unnerving surgical precision to the alarming forensic evidence that suggests we are dealing with a technology far beyond our own, exploring the terrifying possibility that these mutilations are not random acts of cruelty, but part of a global, non-hostile alien agenda. The typical mutilation scene is a study in contradictions. A lifeless animal, often a cow, found intact, yet vital organs have been expertly removed. The cases cluster in areas known for high UFO activity, like the vast San Luis Valley in Colorado. Ranchers like Mike Duran, who discovered one of his cows with the udders and female genitalia cleanly removed, consistently testify that the acts are unlike any natural predator kill. The most chilling aspects of these scenes are universal. Organs like the genitals, eyes, tongues, and ears are surgically removed with uncanny finesse. The animal's blood is entirely drained, yet there is no blood at the crime scene. Crucially, there is a complete absence of evidence. No human footprints, no tire tracks, no signs of struggle, implying the animals were never even on the ground during the procedure. The cuts themselves are the most damning clue. Duran described them as not being made by a knife, but looking like they were cut and cauterized at the same time, clean, like a laser. The sophistication of these cuts is what first broke the earthly paradigm. They are performed with such cellular precision that tissues immediately adjacent to the cut line show no trauma whatsoever, a feat impossible with current human surgical tools, which always leave microscopic cell tearing. This technological signature, coupled with the mysterious nature of the attack, often leads the ranchers themselves to an extraterrestrial conclusion. As Duran stated, upon seeing the scene, his first thought was, "They're back." This initial visceral reaction of the witnesses strongly suggests that the level of precision and the manner of the operation are entirely foreign to our world, hinting at a non-human operative utilizing methods we can only dream of. The mystery transitioned from folklore to forensic science, with the work of individuals like Philip Hoyle, former director of the Animal Pathology Research Unit in the UK. Hoyle spent years investigating these cases, and his findings are arguably the most compelling link to an extraterrestrial hypothesis. He stressed that when examining the wounds under a microscope, one realizes they are not looking at a mere knife wound. Some of the tissue appeared to be unzipped, implying a molecular-level disintegration rather than a cut. The cuts were clean, precise, clinical, and perfectly aligned. He unequivocally stated that the technology used is frankly terrifying and clearly, absolutely clearly, more advanced than anything we currently possess on Earth, suggesting a civilization thousands of years ahead of us. The most shocking evidence came from a substance often found at the wound site, a black, putty-like paste. Analysis revealed this to be degraded hemoglobin, but with a crucial distinction. The red and white corpuscles had been separated using a centrifuge. Hoyle emphasized that this sophisticated process can only be done in a high-tech, controlled laboratory setting. The fact that this specific forensic signature is found on a cow carcass in a remote field utterly invalidates any theory involving earthbound predators or cultists. This finding points directly to a high-level, technologically advanced scientific operation, a kind of biosignature left by the craft's internal environment or procedures. Based on the combination of the sterile cuts and the lack of ground evidence, Hoyle developed a chilling theory about the perpetrator's method of operation. He hypothesized that the entities are using transference beams, essentially anti-gravity beams, to silently levitate the animal off the ground and on board the craft where the surgical procedure is done, before placing it back down. This zero-friction transport system is deemed the only rational explanation for the complete lack of evidence or disturbance surrounding the animal when it is discovered. This hypothesis is further corroborated by hundreds of farmer testimonies reporting strange phenomena coinciding with the mutilations. Bright spheres of light, orbs, and UFOs operating in non-traditional, non-aerodynamic flight patterns, exhibiting speeds and instantaneous directional changes unlike any known human aircraft or helicopter. These sightings are often described as silent, hovering craft operating with a purposeful, stealthy efficiency. If the evidence points to superior technology, the question then becomes why. Hoyle believes the objective is not malevolent, but rather a global surveillance program. He suggests that various alien intelligences have a vested interest in planet Earth and humanity, and they are systematically sampling the environment by removing specific, regenerative tissues and glands from livestock on a global scale. Their primary goal is to monitor the food chain and the environment by collecting genetic materials and tissues, which are then transported off-world for their ultimate purpose, perhaps to monitor the effects of our pollution or disease on Earth's delicate biological systems. Hoyle argues that these entities are not hostile. They genuinely care about our welfare. He views their actions as a meticulous global stewardship of the biosphere, operating in secret to prevent mass panic, because revealing the full extent of this intervention would undoubtedly cause societal collapse. The most curious element of the cattle mutilation phenomenon is not the technology, but its apparent decline in recent years. While high-profile, undeniable cases still surface sporadically, the sheer volume and geographical concentration seen in the 1970s and 1980s have largely diminished. If these acts were the result of a global, systematic extraterrestrial program, why the sudden lull? One major hypothesis within the UFO and mutilation research community, and one that aligns with Philip Hoyle's theory, is that the sampling mission has largely been completed. If the objective was to gather sufficient genetic and tissue samples from the global food chain to establish a baseline of planetary health and monitor the effects of human environmental impact, pollution, pesticides, disease, then the entities may have simply collected enough data. The operation moved from a high-volume data collection phase to a low-volume maintenance or monitoring phase. Essentially, once the initial biological census was complete, the need for dozens of mutilations per year vanished. Furthermore, the decrease might reflect a shift in the alleged alien agenda. If the animal sampling was preparatory to the human breeding program detailed by David Jacobs, perhaps the resources and focus have been redirected entirely. Once the necessary environmental data was correlated with the accelerating human hybridization program, the entities may have pivoted their surveillance efforts away from the fields and more directly towards human abductions and the quiet integration of hybrids into society. The animals provided the necessary biological context. The humans now provide the necessary genetic material and host environment. Therefore, the recent decline in cattle mutilations may not be evidence that the phenomenon was fake, but rather chilling proof that the entities involved are efficient, goal-oriented, and highly successful. They accomplished their mission, gathered their required materials, and have now moved silently onto the next, perhaps far more invasive phase of their complex operation on Earth. The lack of new evidence doesn't signify peace. It might simply mean the surveillance has become so sophisticated and so targeted that we are no longer equipped to detect it. The evidence is complex, frightening, and undeniable. Now we turn the question to you. Do you believe the mutilations are proof of an ongoing alien agenda, or is there a terrestrial explanation we haven't uncovered? Let us know your theories in the comments below. Your speculation and analysis fuel the search for truth. If you found this investigation compelling, please hit the like button, share this video with fellow truth seekers, and most importantly, subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the unexplained. Don't let the mystery go unsolved.